Sounds good. Everyone can hear me, correct? Because I'm using an iPad.
Yes, you're good.
Okay, thanks. All right, so welcome. I'm going to open up the village board meeting. It is Monday, January 25th at 7:32. I think I've already read the instructions a million times. So Sarah, has this meeting been publicly noticed?
The meeting has been posted and noticed according to law.
Thank you. Go ahead and take the roll.
Trustee Menta.
Here.
Trustee Backhorst. I don't see you're on yet. Trustee Carpenter.
Here.
Trustee Ursink.
Here.
Trustee Stokebrand.
Here.
Trustee Warren.
Here.
Trustee Backhorst.
Here.
And President Rosick.
Here.
Everyone's present.
All right, welcome. Our first order of business tonight is a statement, or a special order of business, I guess, is 4A, consider policy 40, tax increment financing district creation and tax increment financing assistance. The person to kick it off is our community development chair, Peter Hammond.
Thank you,
Hi,
President.
Peter.
Good evening, everybody. Can you all hear me okay? Yes. So thank you for taking the time tonight to review this policy. I'll give you a few quick comments and then open it up for conversation, and we'll go from there. I would say the primary drivers to developing this policy, there are 4 drivers that I think about. The first was obviously was identified as a priority both by the CDA and I believe the village board as part of the strategic priorities process. The other is obviously if you're going to do something, it's always good to have a plan and a document that drives that. We are obviously involved in TIF activity, and so to have a document that provides guidance to all the various parties is very important. So we felt we needed to develop something around that. I would say we were forcing staff to fly blind when they were interacting with the community, interacting with developers, and trying to provide guidance. And staff really didn't have any good, they didn't know how to direct people or what the parameters were, so that we put them in a very difficult position. And I'd say the fourth is there was confusion in the marketplace as to what Shorewood's kind of approach to this was. And again, they were, developers or others. We sort of created more work than we needed to, I think, by not having a policy. So I would say those were the 4 things that came together to say we need to develop a policy and put some structure and information in there so people can use it as an effective document. As we got into developing a policy, I would say there were some primary drivers in what ultimately created the final document. The first was we wanted to keep it at a policy level. It is a policy document, so we wanted to be careful about not getting too much into what I would call a desktop procedure document, but keeping it at the policy level, but also not keeping it too high a policy level that it doesn't make it effective. So you'll see as you read through it, there are certain components where maybe we do get into more details and more specifics, around rates of return and those kinds of things. We felt that it was important to provide, I think, more structure and guidance in certain areas. We wanted to focus on the importance of transparency. And that was an interesting conversation. I think we, as you see in the document, I think we mentioned transparency, communication multiple times. Within that, though, we tried not to be prescriptive because we were writing this for future CDAs and future village boards. And while the tools we have now might be effective in 5 or 10 years, there might be other tools. And so we didn't want to limit or restrict what others can do. But the point was that transparency is a primary objective and requirement of any TIF activity. We wanted to obviously provide clarity to the marketplace as to what the parameters of this were. We've already gotten positive feedback just by saying we were developing a TIF policy, so that's exciting. I think we wanted to address, I would say, some themes that had maybe created challenges for us in the past where we were maybe not as clear or where steps were taken. And I think the community in hindsight would have preferred another path. So I think we tried to focus on some of those areas to again provide clarity and guidance. And I would say, clawback language is an example of that, rates of return, some of those things where we wanted again to be specific. I think the whole equity question, we wanted to address that in here with respect to the vendors and the others that developers would use. And I really like what the CDA did here because, I'm not a big fan of sort of the Rooney Rule idea of you allow others to bid. But to me, I don't know, I don't see a lot of results from that. I think, you can put it out to bid to a lot of firms, but then I'm going to pick my cousin anyway to do the work, and that, I did what you required of me. So we have sort of built in right now, it's to some degree general language, but the incentives to the developer are if they do select a minority-owned business or one of the businesses we've identified. So when they actually do that, then they get benefits from that. So I sort of like that part of it. I think it really drives real results and action. Cost management was an important part. Obviously, in the past, the village has borne a lot of the costs of the work associated with this, and now we have fees built in that the developer will pay along the way. I'll be perfectly honest. It took me a while to sort of come to that. I was a little worried that we would maybe limit what was coming to us, but in reading other communities and in talking to people on this group as well as others that are much more experienced in this than I am, that was a standard. And I think, again, it helps staff because it gets rid of maybe projects that we shouldn't be thinking about anyway, and someone might not be willing to put up upfront money, even though it's not a lot, but putting up some money to actually get the process going. And I would say the final point is just trying to make sure that there's strong communication between the CDA and the village board on an ongoing basis to make sure those two entities are in sync and aligned. And I think one of the things we put in there, and it was Trustee Amenta's suggestion, which I really liked, was I think in the communications that we provide to the village board, part of it is we have to specify the benefit if we're coming to you with a proposal, that we have to, write out what the benefit to the village is. I think that step is a good step for us to have to do to really quantify and qualify why is it that we're recommending to do this. I think in the past that maybe has been known, but it wasn't, written and documented and for the record and on the video. And we've all said what the benefit is, and then we'll hold ourselves accountable to that. So I think that's what did it. We took 3 meetings to go through this. So we did, I would say, a very extensive review of it. Great comments from everybody on the CDA. It was a unanimous vote to move it to the village board for approval. So, we're excited that I believe we incorporated everybody's ideas and concepts into a very solid document. And then I would just finish by thanking Rebecca over and over and over again for the work she did, staff did, but Rebecca led this and Michaela certainly supported. But to write a policy from a blank piece of paper is a very difficult thing to do. And I think this is, this will evolve over time, but it is I think a phenomenal policy document to start off with. So I just want to thank Rebecca for all her work on that. So with that, I'll open it to questions or anything the village board wants to ask.
Thank you, Peter. Does anybody on the board have questions? Trustee Warren?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Really appreciate this. And I really thank you for putting together this comprehensive document. It's something that we specified over the years as something that we wanted to get done, and we wanted to have a policy around this and have specifications for these types of programs. So it's really great to finally have this in place and see something tangible in front of our eyes. That said, I have really 3 questions, and I really think it's great to focus on diversity here. And I have 3 kind of follow-up questions. I can ask them all at once, or I can ask them 1, 2, 3, however you want to take them. But 3 things stuck out at me.
Okay. Bring them all.
So the first one is just kind of a nuts and bolts thing. Other qualified agencies. I'm looking at section 5, hiring and contracting for TIF funded projects. Other qualified agencies. We list out a bunch of agencies here, and I know there are many more. So it says maybe approved by the village for this criteria. I'm wondering if that's a village manager approval or just or that needs to go to the board. So we might want some more specificity there. My second question is, in this, we talk about protected class a lot. and maybe this is the paranoid lawyer in me, but I wonder, do we define protected class anywhere in the document? Because that might be something we at least want to tie back to something. I mean, I think we all kind of know what we're thinking, but we might want to put some parameters around this. And the third kind of, again, paranoid lawyer in me, I just want to make sure that the village attorney is kind of, and maybe this ties in with my last question, the village attorney is kind of reviewed and blessed kind of what we're doing here. And I think it's fantastic that we're doing it. Just want to make sure that we're as bulletproof as we can possibly be. And we've pushed the ball as far as we possibly can in terms of diversity here.
Yeah, I think other qualified agencies, and again, Rebecca might be able to jump in more than me. We did have a conversation about, because as you said, we have identified some entities. I think, again, this was one of the challenges where having it at a policy level and not at a detail level, because there will be other entities, organizations that aren't even around now that will be in the future, and we want to be able to work with them. So, I think the ones we were listing, I think we tried to use language that was, these were sort of more as an example. Here are examples, but I don't think it is limited to those, and we wanted to have flexibility to again move depending on what other organizations are out there. With respect to sort of the whose decision, that's a good point. I don't think we've necessarily clarified specifically who gets to decide who that entity is. Just the way the process I think is going to work is, it's going to be both entities, the CDA and the village board. We're going to, I think, deem something to fall within that category, and we're going to agree on that, and then we're going to come to the board and recommend to you, and you're going to decide as well whether you agree with us or not, and you may or you may not. So I feel like we'll get to the place we need to get by the decision process that will happen for a given request. So that's the way I think we'd approach it. And then the legal question is a good question. I didn't think of that. I'm not sure sort of what level of legal review policy documents should go through to make sure they cover all the bases.
Yeah, and it's not something that, it's not necessarily that I see a burning issue. It's just I want to make sure that we're bulletproof. And again, protected class. Again, I don't know that it's something that we need to completely halt the process for, but it just might be nice to have something that says, here's how we're defining protected class. I'm sure it's a definition we can pull. I don't think it's a heavy lift, but I think that's something that would be worthwhile to spell out at least. So we don't look like we're applying whatever standard we want when it comes up.
And my opinion is I don't think that's to the level of a change that I would need to go back to the CDA to.
I think it's a clarification.
Clarification, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Trustee Warren. Do you have any further questions?
Nope, that's it from me.
Okay, is there anybody else on the board that has any questions at this time? I do. Okay, Trustee Amenta and then Trustee Bockhorst.
Yeah, I do think this is great. I'm glad that we are, finally going to have something in writing on how we handle TIF assistance and developer requests for assistance. I have two kind of general comments on it, and one has to do with the zoning decision. And I understand that they're kind of parallel but separate processes. And we say throughout this policy, the zoning, you don't have a guarantee of a rezoning. If you need a rezoning, that's not guaranteed. But I personally think that even if we don't put it in the policy, we need to do some more thought about when and how this rezoning process would fit in with this, because if a developer is going to pay, they pay $5,000 and then they pay $8,000. If we're at the point where we're approving a TIF assistance, I think the zoning issue has to be settled before then. So that, I think that's confusing, to kind of say, okay, well, where is a rezoning happening? The other major issue I have, and I brought this up at the CDA, is, I started attending CDA meetings in probably 2014. And at that time, and I made the point many times, like most people in town do not know what's being discussed here and what's being agreed here. And the answer I got at that point, well, it's on the website and people don't care. And if they cared, they'd look at the website. And so, this communication issue, we don't have a newspaper, right? And this communication issue is one that we struggle with a lot. And it's like, is it incumbent on residents to be watching the website, or is it incumbent upon us as a village board to be communicating actively to residents of, really important, big money decisions, important urban design decisions. These were big decisions of a lot of import to many people. And I'd like to, the descriptions of what the village is going to do is that it'll be on the website, the village manager's memo, and regular public notices for CDA and village board meetings. I don't have a specific recommendation, but I'll just say, based on the experience that we all went through in 14, 15, 16, I think a little bit more effort is on the village's part is probably worthwhile. For example, when we've talked about certain public works things, we send out a postcard, we include it in the property tax. I don't know. There's a variety of other ways that we can communicate. And I know we say, oh, it's on the developer to communicate, but the developer's communication is going to be pretty pictures. And isn't this great? So I'm not happy with the communication portion. Okay, I do appreciate that the CDA did include the recommendation will be statement of public benefits of the project. I'd like to add to that, merely increasing assessed value is not a sufficient public purpose, because anything that's built, whether TIF or not, increases assessed value. To me, that is not something that would qualify a project for getting public assistance. So I would like to add that. The same language is repeated over and over again about the communication thing, and I think it can just be I think it's described in the introduction, and I know we talked about this, but I think we could just say as described in the introduction. We don't have to keep repeating it. And I think I just that on page 5, number 11. We talk about the clawback and the ability to look at developers' records. So the clawback mandates a developer to provide the village or its financial advisor with evidence of IRR, blah, 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 at specified periods of time after project completion and upon sale. And I don't know whether the board wants to consider why we would not have access to that information from the developer at our request, at any time. I'm not sure why there shouldn't be an open book policy. We're essentially partners. If we're giving money, we're equity partners with no equity in this project. And I think we should have an ability to see what the issues are, or to see the books at any time. I do appreciate that we're trying to address equity issues. But the other thing is, I know the Conservation Committee has talked about forwarding some of their issues, energy saving, water saving, reducing stormwater, which is a big issue for our village. So I don't know if we want to try to address some of the environmental conservation issues also in this policy. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Amenta. And I apologize, my screen does not show Trustee Stokebrand. So Trustee Stokebrand, for some reason, it just shows 9. So if you have a question, just please speak up. Trustee Bockhorst.
Thank you. So I'm really excited that we have this in front of us today. And I appreciate what Mr. Hammond had mentioned regarding giving future boards flexibility. That includes with this document itself. Even if we do adopt this document unchanged or otherwise, we always have as a board the opportunity to go back and make revisions. And given that it is a living document, and this will be, just like any policy that we create, Sometimes you have to go through it and live through it in order to realize the strengths and weaknesses. So it looks like, there was a considerable amount of time put in to developing this. And I guess I have several questions, and I probably will have more, but I do want to start with the first, the memo page regarding, and I do want to say hat tip to transparency. Transparency is the biggest buzzword kicked around by any organization. And so to that point, on the memo page, I believe it is item number 3 on the first page regarding October 23rd, 2020, said over the last few months, staff, Chair Hammond and President Rozak met with 2 developers looking at different sites. And then it kind of goes through the process. I was just wondering which developers those were and if any of you had experience working with them in the past, because I know that a variety of us wear a variety of hats and have worked for other organizations. So I don't know if you, President Rozak or others, could let us know in the spirit of transparency who those developers are, as well as if you have a relationship with them in any way in the past. And that's my first question. I have others, so I guess I could stop there and then continue on with some of the questions. But
Manager Ewald, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I remember off the top of my head, I don't know who the developers were.
I think Rebecca set him up. Rebecca?
I'm sorry, Trustee Bachhorst, you were, for some reason, my sound was cutting in and out. So you were looking for names of developers that I've consulted with on the policy?
No, the 2 that we met with that are referenced in the item 3 of the memo. The
right,
2 that came in to propose possible projects to us.
Gosh, I don't recall one off the top of my head. Another one was Catalyst Development,
Right.
but I don't recall the first initial one, the name of their firm.
Well, perhaps you could mail that out to all of us. And then the second part of that question that I asked was just if any of you who was in the room with those developers, I know we don't have this in the Village of Shorewood, but we do in other organizations where we have to disclose, previous relationships and whatnot with contractors, especially when we're involving high level of finances, because the opportunities, I'm not suggesting that anyone here would do this, but the opportunities for ethics violations and others are pretty significant at that point. So, given I've heard transparency, I'm all for transparency. I think we all are. So, and I'm not trying to say that anyone has any illicit or any other kind of, relationship with these developers, but I do think that if we're using this as an example in our memo as to why we have this policy created, would be helpful to have the information on that. But we can save that. If you want to email that out to us, Rebecca, that would be fine. Also, the developer fee. I'm curious, I'm curious how we arrived at this number and whether or not we feel that this is cost prohibitive to any of these protected class, minority, and other kind of organizations. I mean, I know it's a drop in the bucket when we're talking about multi-million-dollar projects. But anyway, go ahead, Rebecca.
One thing I was just going to say with respect to your first point, and I apologize, now I know maybe where you're going, but in phase 1 application, part 1, we actually ask if any owner, member, stockholder, partner, director of any of the entities or members of the immediate family have a relationship with any member of the village, whether that be an employee or a member of the board, or something of that nature. Is that what you're trying to get at?
No, I was talking about item 3 in the memo, where it explicitly mentioned that you, Chair Hammond, and, well, I don't know if you're in this part, but President Rozak met with 2 developers looking at different sites in the village. One expressed interest in affordable housing, the other one, anyway, we all can read it.
Okay. Oh, okay.
I just like when we have information about this and that how it guides our decision-making process, as well as the new trustees here too, especially again, not just because we're talking about transparency, but it would be nice to know who said developers are. It does give me a lot more context in this, as I imagine it does the rest of you. And also, as I mentioned before, if we are looking at something that large with developers and that is influencing our policy and our decision-making, it would be in the spirit of transparency, very beneficial for all of us to understand who they
Okay,
are.
and now I do know both names. It was Catalyx Development and Dominion Properties.
Okay, I'll reserve the second part of my question on that. I'll email the entire board. Okay, Dominic, okay, properties. Thank you.
Okay,
And then the other question was about the deposit or the fee, the developer fee, whether or not, I mean, that was considered cost prohibitive for a lot of the classes and individuals that are outlined here as being preferred.
the fees that are associated are the actual cost for doing the work on behalf of Baker Tilly and analyzing that information. We're not charging any additional for our staff time associated with it, and it was found to be comparable based upon other communities that we compared to.
Okay,
Did
fantastic.
look at other.
I'm really happy to hear that. I do, sorry. Okay, I do agree with, in some regard with Trustee Amenta regarding the zoning issue. But as we all know, each project is individual, and the zoning code that we have and the height restrictions, et cetera, in Shorewood are as a baseline guideline to allow us to have more input for projects that come in. So perhaps even beefing up understanding that zoning laws aren't necessarily there to say we can only have 4-story buildings or whatever the height is, but that's our general guideline in order. And I think a lot of people don't realize that the village board doesn't have the right to get involved when there aren't differences from the zoning. So we kept it really, what is the word? The height lower in the past so that we would be able to have a lot of impact and a lot of insight, as well as authority in any development process. But as we all know here, as long as people are meeting the guidelines and aren't asking for public assistance and everything else, if they keep their building under the 4-story minimum, then really the board has very little involvement at all. So I do appreciate that. Let's see, the communication plan, communication is the #1 thing in any relationship, any organization. So that always can be beefed up. I am glad that we have many modes of communication. I agree with Trustee Amenta that alerting the public on public decisions at the appropriate times is great. And I know we do that in a variety of ways, and we can't force people to pay attention, and we can't force people to be interested in what is going on in the daily operations of the village. But I have seen numerous improvements over the many years, and I imagine that we could still continue on that. Section 4, let's see. Policy statements. Well, I also agree that back to Section 3, TIF goals. I guess it's stated in the first goal regarding increasing tax base. I'm not sure, it would be kind of helpful here, I think, for the public, especially since TIF is kind of a complicated thing, especially if you're not immersed in it, that people do understand a little bit more of tax incremental financing, and that it's not, and the nuance and the trade-off. That I know that a lot of the rhetoric, not just with this board, but in a lot of organizations, is subsidies or handouts. And I think that it's irresponsible for any of us on this board to unilaterally, disavow TIF, because there are times the but if for clause and other times that this is essential for these types of projects. But anyway, that's going back to the goals. Oh, and also the second thing that in that goal, I didn't see it, but maybe it was here somewhere else, that our ability, that we're really hamstrung, and the one mechanism that we have that can help us raise revenue is net new development, and how many things are tied to that. So I'm not trying to say we need to encourage people to be pro-development, no, but we do need to, back to the communication and transparency, let the public know that there are reasons why these things exist, and that even if we all don't want development, that really it is one of the only ways that we will what is the word? Be able to realize additional dollars in our village, because our costs continue to rise. Our state aid is flat. We've had a board that has really worked hard to have a low tax levy, and we've spent a ton of reserves. So really, development is one of our only options, sadly. And we've put ourselves, all of us have kind of forced our hand on that we do have to look for development in the future, whether we want it or the public wants it or not, to sustain the level of services and everything else that this village requires. Section 4, I'm almost done, don't worry. Section 4, policy statements. Where was it? I was looking at protected class. I think that was, maybe that's at the beginning of. Well, what I can do is I can look for it. I didn't put down well, there are no page numbers on here, but I was a little confused by the definition of protected class. Oh, here it is. Sorry. Section 5, hiring and contracting for TIF funded projects. The first paragraph on section 5, which is on the bottom of page 5, mentions that that we're looking for projects available to minority enterprise businesses, women enterprise businesses, or disadvantaged enterprise businesses, and that a qualified business shall either be one owned by a person who are considered with a protected class and or more than 60% of their workforce consisting of protected classes. So I'm not an attorney here, but that to me was a little bit confusing, because I'm not sure that women enterprise were not a protected class per se. So I'm not sure how that relates to the rest.
Thank you. Are you looking for an answer now from someone?
Yeah, I guess since we have the folks that worked on this together, are you considering a woman enterprise business a protected class, or did I just misread that entire first paragraph?
Peter?
I'm not an expert in this area, but I feel like that's apples and oranges. A protected class is what a person is. So, the woman of the one-owned business is probably a protected class, but the woman-owned business is I think those are two different things. So,
well,
I think she's
asking.
asking.
Is Attorney Bear on the call? Because I know he knows the definition. I can Google it right now. I just didn't have time to do that when I was writing that down. But
yeah, it's defined under federal law pretty clearly. And if you look under 5, it has that definition there where it talks about, I'm just looking on page 5 here. It talks about the criteria meeting one of the following criteria as a qualified business meets the following criteria, and then it lists all those sub bullet points.
Does it list women?
Help me out here if anybody's got it. Let's see. The business has been vetted and verified as a minority business enterprise through one of these qualified agencies. Wisconsin Women's Business Initiative Corp. And then there's a link. Wisconsin LGBT Chamber of Commerce, Wisconsin Black Chamber of Commerce, Milwaukee Urban League.
Yes, by inference, yeah, it does. It's not specifically clear, but by inference.
Yeah, and like I said, traditionally the village attorney does not work with the CDA or attend the CDA meetings. I was not part of the upfront development of this or attend any of those meetings, but we have compliance people in our office that do this all week long and twice on Sunday and help. I mean, if there's specific questions related to this, we can run it. I can have this vetted and
Attorney,
clean up the language, but
are you just stating that you have not reviewed the document?
Well, I reviewed it in preparation for the meeting this evening, but I don't know. I mean, I can't speak to what the intent was because I wasn't involved in the CDA meetings that were part of the process of developing the policy. So I defer to the CDA on what the intent was with respect to that question.
Trustee Bachor.
Sorry.
I saw your hand. Did you have a follow-up?
well, I did. So I guess I'm confused by that first is no one else confused by section 5, the first paragraph there? For any project that receives or otherwise benefits from public TIF assistance, developer shall advertise and make all design, construction, and other contracted services related to the project available to minority enterprise businesses, comma, women enterprise businesses, or disadvantaged enterprise businesses. And then it says a qualified business shall either be one owned by persons who are consistent with a protected class, and or number 2, have more than 60% of their workforce consisting of protected classes.
Yeah, I'm confused with that too. So I think what Trustee Bachhorst, what to add to it,
I think it does need to be looked over by an attorney, because yes, that's confusing to me. And I don't think women are considered a protected class, but if we are, great.
Well, there's under FHA, there's 7 under federal law: race, color, religion, national origin, sex, disability, or family status.
Doormat.
So yeah, I mean, it can be.
The goal of the CDA was to provide equity. So to me, whatever the language needs to be legally, we'll put in here. I don't want the village board to get caught up in, I guess, again, the details of what is a protected class. Our goal is to have developers work with protected classes, or work with what I generally call minority-owned businesses, those types of things that we've all talked about with respect to equity. So whatever the language needs to say, we will work with the village attorney and whoever else we need to do to get that language to be clearer if it needs to be.
Well, that makes sense.
This is not a point of conversation for the CDA. We were all in complete agreement. And again, to me, the point is, how are we actually going to put some teeth into this to make it actually be effective? And to me, that was the point of saying you only get something if you actually hire one of these businesses.
Okay, that's fine.
More important. That's the more important point to me of this whole section, not who's what. We can figure that out, I guess, pretty easily.
Well, we can, but if we can't agree on who is what here, then I'm not sure how we're going to be able to figure that out. So I hear what you're saying, and I even heard you say it, Mr. Hammond, that you had said protected classes and then these other things. So there's ambiguity.
I agree. There's no good definition. I mean, again, we don't want to be, who's defining, because we tried to be as inclusive as possible.
Exactly.
That's who defines protected class.
Well, yeah. So again, no good deed goes unpunished. And I mean, I don't know.
I'm not trying to say you're doing a bad thing. I'm just saying, if I don't understand it, can I apply for this or not? And that it won't be, if I can't understand it here tonight, then yes. So what I'm hearing is that you wanted to make this as equitable as possible. Yep. And give priorities as far as finance, actually exclusive, only someone who falls under the category, however we eventually get that defined. Yep. Minority, whether or not, if a female-owned business is considered a minority-owned business, okay, I can understand that, or 60% of the workforce, etc. But if we don't know what those definitions are, then we can't evaluate, nor can anyone apply. So, and I can't as a responsible trustee agree to something if I don't feel that this body even understands what it is. And I'm not saying that's the case. So the intent is to diversify the application pool, but it seems here that it's exclusive to equity or to diversity.
Color. Is it just color, or is it include women? I think is the question.
No, it's not. I mean, I'm just saying that in order to receive the assistance, you have to be a minority business, whether or not that's the 7 protected classes.
Does the village have any other policies that have laid
we don't have equity impact statements, so we don't have any kind of requirements like the city of Milwaukee have. So this is new for us regarding a preferential treatment for any class in this village of Shorewood. We have not done this before. I'm not saying, and it's long overdue, it's great, but
I agree. We got to get it right. Yes, fair enough. So yeah, I don't want to, I think the point is well taken, and I'm not sure how to proceed without this turning into, a circle of meetings before we get approval, other than, I think the protected classes that Nathan laid out, I feel like I believe that's what the CDA was looking at, and those seem to be inclusive of all the things we were thinking about.
I think a protected
That's also
class,
my understanding.
I don't know that women are a protected class. I think in the federal definition of protected class.
Well, he said sex, so.
Well, that would be men then too.
Yeah, I think that's Trustee Bachhorst's, in my opinion, correct assumption is that, or observation is that in one sentence, you do make it very diverse by including women in some of your references that Attorney Barrett had spilled out. And then in the next sentence, which she read off, was this is limited basically to the protected class. Those are not the same.
Right, and you also, within defining it as protected class, we're leaving out gender and other kind of diversity or gender identity. And I don't know if that was part of the intent of this, but what if you have transgender owned businesses? Is that diversity that you guys are seeking, or is it limited to just, so I don't know. Yeah, I'm very confused, I guess, the more I think of it. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, that, these are great, we're having a discussion here. And I'm very grateful for this. And I'm grateful that this village is looking for that. And we have talked about this a lot with our purchasing policy, other things. We do not have any kind of equity impact statement or any requirements. And City of Milwaukee and a lot of other places do. Not exclusivity though, that I've seen for being awarded contracts. It's just, but anyway.
I was just giving one example.
I'm sorry, it's not exclusive to be awarded contracts. It's only, the developer's only available to get further incentives. There are incentives available to the developer if they contract with one of these businesses laid out here. They don't have to, but they won't get any further incentive or financial reward for doing that. So that to us was the teeth we put into it to encourage them to do it.
Well, it says hiring and contracting for TIF funded projects. So am I hearing this correctly, that in order to receive a TIF funded contract, you must comply by the diversity standards outlined here?
Only if you want to receive further incentives, which is, that is defined somewhere else in this document, I believe. Pretty sure so again, we're not requiring people to engage these businesses in order to receive TIF funding. We are trying to encourage it and offering and again, it is generally stated, further incentives are available for those developers that engage these types of businesses that we've discussed. And Rebecca or Michaela, am I misstating that?
The CDA clearly wanted to have there be an incentive provided. So it's not precluding everything. It's just, it gives the opportunity and puts everyone on notice that they're willing to look at incentivizing based upon the parameters here.
Yes.
Michaela, if you have anything else further to add.
I do not, but that's correct. It was intended to be not qualify for assistance, but as you said, it was more an incentive to try to meet those guidelines.
So it says someplace in here, we would provide possibly density incentives if they engage one of these businesses. We would, again, we wanted to provide, again, more general flexibility to encourage the developer to engage these businesses. But again, we left it open because I don't think we can predefine what those might be. It depends on the project. Now, again,
Okay.
Attorney Barry, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just wanted to point out earlier, somebody had asked in the abstract what are protected classes under federal law. I was just rattling off some examples under one particular program, FHA, but there's different ones under employment. But the state has programs where it has a rigorous evaluation process where they qualify contractors for minority owned status or And there's, there's categories that they fit in based upon ownership percentages and those types of things and who is owned. So they have, these are not unknown, or they're not, they don't come out of the blue. You could do that. I just, again, not having been involved in the process, I don't know what the intent was, and that's what we've been talking about. But just as another, by way of another example, for employment discrimination, under the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, there's also race, color, religion, sex, pregnancy, sexual orientation, gender identity, national origin, age, disability, genetic information. And there's a number of different classes under federal law that are protected under various portions of federal law. But there is, the state, you could, if you wanted to have qualified minority contractors, you can do that. The state has a process and a program, and I know Milwaukee does it. Milwaukee County has a process like that too, if that's something you want to mirror.
Just wondering which ones we're following in this one. State, are we following the standards protected classes from the county that defines it? Are you?
Yeah, I don't know what the intent was. Again, I wasn't involved in the drafting portion, but I think that's what we've been talking about over the last 20 minutes, generally what the intent was.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Bockhorst, do you have any further questions?
Well, I do appreciate what Attorney Barrett said regarding qualified minority contractors. And maybe I just need to read this over again regarding these additional incentives. I know that they're listed that they may exist, and that's great, or they may not. But an example of at least one would be a little helpful for me to wrap my head around the hypothetical incentive that may or may not, and who's going to determine whether or not that's an incentive. But the qualified minority contractors piece, I think President Rozek just mentioned this. It may be not in the exact same way that I'm thinking of it, but are we talking, is there how was this obtained? Were there other examples used? And I'm not trying to give you a hard time here, Peter. I'm just, a policy change is big. And this is our one opportunity to ask questions as a board, given this, unless it gets kicked back to the CDA or whatnot. So were these based on other examples from either Milwaukee County, Milwaukee, the state, other municipalities, or was it designed in-house? And there's no right answer. I'm just curious.
I can help with that one.
Okay.
We had reached out to the city. They do not specify within the scope of their TID policy an incentive of this nature. And then we had also reached out. Sun Prairie was actually one of the only communities that we did find that specifically called out for parameters. And so this language was massaged. I think it changed several times as we were in the CDA, just for purposes of clarification. Specific incentives were not identified because the project variance was, could be, Michaela had mentioned density. That may be one thing that the board would be willing to consider, but there may be some other component of the project. So the CDA understood that they were never going to provide an all-encompassing list, but definitely did, feel strongly about including it in the policy and having it open a door to that discussion with the developer.
Thank you. Trustee Bockhorst, does that complete your questions?
For now, yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Does other board members have questions before I ask mine? I don't see any hands up, so if I miss anyone, please speak up. I do have a few questions. Thank you so much for putting this together. I cannot thank you enough for the application process, which I think will help the village going forward. And I think that a policy absolutely makes sense. And I'm very proud that this is occurring and that you've put so much time into this. The first question I have is eligibility study. So in phase 2, it talks about once phase 2, you pay the $8,000 and we approve a term sheet. And then after the term sheet is approved, then we do the feasibility study. And I don't know how you set terms and approve terms without doing the feasibility study first. can someone explain how that was the timing of that?
Sorry, what page are you on?
I don't actually have the page number, but I have my notes, and it's just, I think phase 2, it talks about, there's a term sheet approved at some point, and then after the term sheet is approved by the village board or the terms of the agreement, then it says we conduct a feasibility study. Staff will proceed with zoning, feasibility study, blah, blah, blah. But it's after the terms are adopted by the board or approved by the board. And I'm assuming the terms are the IRR, the clawback clause, I mean, all the terms that'll go into the writing up of the document. Usually it's called a term sheet. And I'm just wondering how you come to the terms and adopt them without doing the feasibility study first.
President Rozek, this is
Yes.
Michaela. I can address that question, I think.
Okay, thank you.
So the intent of that process, when you get to the feasibility study itself, is what's required with creation of the TIF plan. So when you create the project plan, you have to include the feasibility study with the project plan. And so the intent of that was to meet the statutory requirements, and not wanting to go through creation of the project plan and the feasibility if the terms couldn't be agreed upon. So the intent was, the financial needs analysis was already completed, and to some extent the feasibility would have already been completed to get to the term sheet. However, to follow the statutory language of creating the project plan and the feasibility study, that's why it's listed that way.
Okay, I know what you're talking about now. Thank you. So maybe somewhere in, before you get to the point in the document where you say terms are, I call it a term sheet, but adopted by the village board, maybe there's the word financial analysis, financial feasibility is conducted, an initial feasibility study has been ran, and then village board approves terms. Then you can, I know what you're talking about, do the formal documentation after we've approved the term sheet, which we used to do at the city. But I just didn't catch that I didn't see the words financial feasibility analysis had been done prior to the village board looking at the terms. So if maybe just being more specific about that ahead before it gets to the board.
So on item 3, just to make sure I understand. So phase 2, item 3, staff shall analyze each public financial assistance application, provide analysis to the CDA for review and consideration with plans, zoning, priorities, TIF goals, and financial analysis. The CDA will provide a recommendation on the application and development agreement terms to the village board to be considered by the village of Shorewood for possible TID creation and approval. Included
So, yeah,
with the statement of public benefit of the project, how the fit is. So what of that are we missing?
So the financial analysis, that's the financial feasibility study, correct? I think that's how Michaela just said it. Is that correct, Michaela?
Yeah, that is correct. So I think I think what the request is to clarify the number 3 under phase 2, saying financial feasibility analysis, and then so just defining that that's occurring before you get to phase 3, which is the actual project plan and feasibility study per the statute.
Yes, thank you. Oh, that was number 1. My second question is, I'm trying to go in order. Is there any disclosure of all members before we get to a term sheet approved by the village board? Is there any disclosure of all members of the LLC or type of corporation that is applying? And the only reason I ask that is if there's any conflict of interest, it's very important that the members of that corporation are disclosed before we go any further, before you bring it to us. And going with that is there's a footnote at the very bottom of the policy, and it talks about financial information is public record based on Wisconsin statute, blah, blah, blah. And I just want to be clear that it's really not, I mean, the statute is very clear that things like members of the LLC or financial data is not public record. It's not disclosed to the open records request until the plan is adopted, until there's actually a TIF agreement adopted. Otherwise, nobody would apply for money. Nobody wants their bank information disclosed. And so saying that, people might say, well, you don't want to disclose LLC members or corp members because people, that would be public knowledge, but it would be, I believe, protected. So is there a requirement to disclose who are members of the corporation?
Yes. It's in the application, phase 1 application, statement 9, principles of existing or proposed corporation partnership LLC, including name, address, title, and interest.
Okay, I could have missed that. Thank you.
Yep.
And then for the application fees, it says they'll be refunded, or they may be, if we approve the TID, we may, out of the proceeds of the TID, refund the fees that the developer paid. Is that both the application fee of $5,500 and the study fee of $8,000 and any other fees that we ask for based on hiring a consultant, or is it simply just the $8,000 plus the consultant fees?
I don't want to misspeak. Go ahead.
Oh, that was in reference to the 5,000 and the 8,000 or 5,500 phase 1 and phase 2 application fees.
And any additional costs that we may require for consultant fees, correct?
Correct.
So it would be all refunded. It may be all refunded. That
wasn't my understanding. My understanding, it was just the 8,000 that could be refunded, not the 5, but I could be wrong.
That's what I'm asking. Rebecca, I'm sorry, did you say it was both?
We don't have anything that distinguishes between the two.
Okay, so my understanding is they may be refunded everything. And I just wanted to, similar to what Trustee Bockhorst was saying, with who decides what incentive, and I'll get to that later, but I think it's very equitable and developers like consistency. And so it's really important to be clear on what we're going to be asking every single developer in terms of financing. One, I would call the $5,500 fee an application fee. And then the $8,000 second phase fee is study fee. And I'd be clear, because I'm not clear yet, but does that also include, in Milwaukee, it was $5,000 application fee, a $10,000, I don't remember the exact number, study fee, plus any additional fees. So if the study actually cost $30,000, which it did one time to do a feasibility analysis on a TID application, we charged $30,000. So we got the quote from the consultant, gave it to them and said, this would be the fee. It will be refunded if the TID is approved. And if it is not, then at least the city was covered for running that analysis and paying the consultant the $30,000. So I think that's the intent of that second fee, is to cover all of our costs associated with the study. If the TID doesn't go forward, so if the village board for some reason says no, then we're not out, the taxpayers are not out $8,000, $10,000, $15,000, or whatever it may cost to run that analysis through a consultant, which we would probably need to do since we don't really have the in-house capability. So I just want to be clear that, is it 8,000 plus any additional fees that we may incur for running this analysis? And if so, is that I would recommend that that's the only thing that is refunded if the TID is approved.
In each of the applications, it states if actual costs of the review exceed the initial fee, additional funds may be required prior to continuing the review.
So we'll get, okay. Keep going,
so,
sorry.
Just to clarify, Trustee Stokebrand is correct. The $5,500 is non-refundable, as defined in policy. It says non-refundable fee of $5,500, and then the $8,000 is potentially refundable, and it does say if the TIF district is created, the fee and third-party costs may be refunded by future revenues of the TIF district. So I think that was what you were getting to, President Rozak, right? Was
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I was looking at, I had a lot of papers in front of me, and I was looking at the prior draft. That was in front of me. My apologies.
Okay, so my understanding, and then Trustee Carpenter, I'll call right upon you to follow up. My understanding is that the $5,500 fee is an application fee. You look it over, you run it by, and you determine whether you want to move forward or not. If you're going to move forward, you're going to charge $8,000 and the cost of the study, whatever the consultant quote is, or $8,000, the cost of the study minus the 8,000. I just want to make sure, is it, in Milwaukee, it was the 8,000 or whatever that number was, plus the cost of the fee, whatever the consultant was going to cost?
So this is 8,000 to compensate for consultant and staff time required to complete a full analysis, underwriting, and presentation of the proposed public financial assistance.
But what if the consultant costs 15,000?
Yeah, so I think we want that additional language, President Rozek.
I do too.
Aye.
So I just, the purpose of that second money is, well, when I wrote this for the city of Milwaukee, the purpose of that second money was to cover the costs really of, yes, staff time. We never used it, as Rebecca said at the beginning, we never really used it for city time. We only used it to pay outside external bills. Like if there was something associated, like the financial feasibility study that would be conducted, we would pay the consultant to do that for us. And so that cost, we would want the developer to pay. And if the TIF goes through, that means, yes, that entity, the legislator, thought it was a good idea for the village or the city. And so we refunded it because we're going to get benefits from it. But if the legislative body says, no, after this feasibility study was run and the consultant did it, we owe the consultant this money, but we're not going to adopt this TID, then the money was not refunded, but we weren't out taxpayer money for running that feasibility analysis. So I just, I think that additional language, as Trustee Stuckborn had just mentioned, should be added, that it is 8,000 plus the cost of, whatever quote we get from the consultant to do the work. And then as the application already says, as the policy already says, once the village board approves, if they do approve the TID, those two things would be refunded, the 8,000 plus the consultant fee.
President Rozek, can I just,
Sure.
The follow-on sentence to what I read. So in addition, if staff engages an independent consultant to review the application, the applicant will pay for all third-party costs incurred. Could we, I think to address I think we could modify that sentence, because it's not just review the application. I think it's, I think we could come up with more general language that gets to your point of, if we have to do additional work and additional research because of the complexity of the project, I agree that the developer should be on the hook for those.
Yeah. So by the time we get to the $8,000, usually the consultant will have given us, okay, if we're going to move forward with this, the village board says the term sheet is approved and we're moving forward, or whatever phase, then they will have given us a quote of what it would cost to do the rest of the work. And then we would pass that along to the developer and say, you need to write us an $8,000 check if you want to proceed, plus $10,000 that it's going to cost for our consultant's work. And those two things will be refunded if the village board proceeds with adopting this TID. And Michaela, is that the intent? Is that what you understand?
Correct. Right. The intent is any of the out-of-pocket costs would be covered by the developer.
Okay. Trustee Carpenter?
I just asked for almost all of my questions regarding this policy were really just around the fees, and I'm just not sure I'm clear on, if the project is approved, why they would be refunded the costs for the study, why that is not the developer's expense.
I can tell you why in the Milwaukee, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say industry practice, but I would say it is fairly common practice to do that. I think it, it puts the onus on the developer up front to cover the costs, but then provides, again, incentives on the back end to make it work, and that we're partnering with them that, if the economic or the financial analysis works out, we all benefit from it. So they get some of that benefit back. So it is consistent with other communities that have it, that there is some refunding component to it.
And is it the refunding component in other communities 100%, which is what we're saying, or is it 50%? Because I think I hear you. That makes sense to me, but because then we're incurring the costs. If it's approved, we're incurring all of those costs.
Not the 5,500.
Right, but the 8,000 plus whatever, on top of that, maybe.
I can answer from what I know from history, if you'd like. I mean, from other communities. So the $5,000. So what was happening in the city of Milwaukee, which is a little bit bigger and had many more requests, I think, than the village of Shorewood at the time. The application fee was established because you want to know that the people are serious, that they're not. There's way too many requests that will come in. If you don't have an application fee, anyone's going to ask for money, and the amount of time spent of staff time to have to run the initial feasibility study or even run it by the village board, say, is too much once it's just open for anything. So if you're serious that you think there's a gap in your financing, that was the initial application fee, was to slow the requests, because anyone could come to you for requests. The second fee is more of protecting yourself as a for taxpayer money, because if it's approved, we would have had to pay, meaning the village or if we approve those terms, the village board, the second phase is really running that analysis, like true, and getting all the documentation in place. It costs money. If we end up not approving the TID, we don't want to be out that money for the taxpayers, because we're not getting anything. The project's not creating any more tax. We're not going to have a project. But if the project goes forward, we do get those benefits. We do get increased taxes. There's no reason we wouldn't have paid for those costs to begin with. So it is, as Peter had mentioned, typical that it's a partnership, and really the second fee and the covering of the consultant costs is to protect the taxpayers, because if it doesn't go through, then it was a way to get the money back, and not have to just pay it out of our actual village budget that wasn't budgeted for. We had no budget for it. So because we use outside consultants and we don't budget for that ahead of time, the TID once adopted, can afford to pay that. But if it's not adopted, where are you going to get those funds from? So I think it was more of getting the funds up front in the event that it doesn't pass. That's my experience. Trustee Stokebrand. And I do have other questions, but not on this one.
Thank you.
Trustee Stokebrand. Did you have?
I would let Trustee Carpenter finish, and then I'll.
Oh, no, all of my questions have been answered, or asked and answered. That was my only other one. So thank you for letting me interrupt. I'm done. Thanks.
You're welcome. And do you have anything more on the fees, Trustee Stokebrand?
Yeah, I would concur with going with application. Let's label that 5,500 one an application fee. I think that's a good suggestion. And I think we should label that $8,000 one a review or study fee. Pick your noun or adjective. And then I wonder, how do you want this to happen? If we tinker with the language here, do you want motions? President Rosick, do you want motions now for this language, for these tinkers, or what's your preference?
It depends how much tinkering we do. So far I've heard of 2 tinkerings, and if I misstate them, let me know. But one was to more specifically define protected class, and/or stop using that word and define what it is of who would receive additional funding if they were selected as contractors. What is that? What qualifies? What is the qualification? And then the second so far has been changing the wording a little bit on application fee, defining what labeling what the titles are for the fees and defining exactly what is refunded to the developer. So if those are the only two, I think it'll be up to the board. We could make a motion and just say, having staff do those two things for approval, or we could ask for it to come back before we move forward. Trustee Stokebrand.
I think Trustee Amenta, I don't know if she's, she had some concern though about, I think the top goal was enhancing or diversifying the village's economic and property tax base. But I think that she wanted something added there, perhaps, although an increase in the assessed value of a property alone does not justify village financial support, something like that. I'm on page 58, TIF goals number 1. Is that?
Thank you for reminding me that, because that was the third suggestion for additions. I think we will have to, if we're going to make a motion tonight, we will have to clarify the 3 things in the motion, or the 2 things, or the 1 thing. So I would suggest that if we do make a motion other than bring it back with these things that have been suggested, that those 3 things are outlined unless there's any further changes. I do want to go with, I had something to go with, but Trustee Ursink, if you have something to add to that.
Yeah, I'd also like to kind of piggyback a little bit off of what Trustee Menta initially stated by, maybe placing more of an incentive on green infrastructure, energy efficiency. So going to the Conservation Committee to ask maybe their input on this as well. But I would appreciate that if we would also incentivize projects that utilize green infrastructure and energy saving elements.
That was, so thank you so much. I'm going to complete my questions and then we'll make a determination, Trustee Stokebrand, on how we want to move forward on the motions. And then going with something about Trustee Menta's. Trustee Menta had mentioned that she wanted to tinker with the language, that financial and increasing tax base was not enough. It would have to be increasing as a reason to adopt a TID. I agree with her that the language should say increasing tax base and one of these, the following, is enough rationale for, but any just alone increasing tax base is not a justification in my mind to adopt it and give away financial taxpayer money, because anything that's built will increase the tax base. So saying that, I also thought, I don't know if it was talked about the CDA, but I strongly feel that a sentence should be placed in the document that says no funding will be provided for market rate or luxury housing. City of Milwaukee has that in theirs about luxury housing. I believe our housing study concluded and verbalized in the open house when we had our open house for the conclusions. I asked the specific question, does Shorewood need to subsidize market rate or luxury housing? And the answer was absolutely not, that we have a market for that. We have a strong income. Matter of fact, all of our units, I believe they said, that are, in the $800 range, which are considered affordable in standard, are our older apartments on Wilson for a 1-bedroom, and yet they're occupied by higher income individuals. And so we don't have a problem with market rate or luxury housing at this moment. So as our policy, as Trustee Bachhorst always says, it can be changed later, but at this moment, when I adopt this policy, if I vote yes, I think it strongly needs to say that no funding will be provided for market rate or luxury housing. So that would be my suggestion. Green infrastructure, thank you, Trustee Ursink, for bringing that up. I do believe the Conservation Committee may have submitted some green infrastructure suggestions. I don't know where that stands, but I'm strongly in favor of including, if we're going to include additional incentives, which I'll get to in my last statement. I think that including additional incentives for green infrastructure or requirements rather than incentives would make sense. So before I get to my last point or suggestion.
Is that where this belongs? Is the TIF policy, the board would determine that that's the appropriate place for this, not in other committees that a development would have to go through with respect to what it looks like.
In my
And
opinion, in experience, the city of Milwaukee did it. Many other municipalities include green infrastructure in their policy, either as a requirement or with incentives in order to get taxpayer funding. And can you just let me know, did the Conservation Committee submit anything to us? Peter, Rebecca?
We have had conversations with the Conservation Committee. We have documentation from them that's a little dated. Oh, look, someone's waving.
Who's,
I'm
I'm sorry, I can't see.
Don,
I'm
have an
on
answer
the
to that?
Conservation, I don't mean to interrupt. I'm on the Conservation Committee, and I believe that Josh and several others submitted some lead programs, different ideas for development, anything that we're doing in the village. I believe they submitted to the CDA.
Yes, a while ago. And I just want to make sure we have the most. I thought the committee was going through another review of it. So I guess I just want to make sure we have the most current iteration of that document.
Well, it's the most current that I am aware of.
Okay.
But I think
Thank you.
Josh or one of the other, we have there's an architect on our committee. There's several different people. I think they would be able to address that. But as I remember, that was the most current document.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I know it's not in front of us tonight, so we can't really review it or discuss it at the moment, but I would highly recommend that and concur with Trustee Ursink that should be addressed somewhere in our document. And my last point talks about diversity and equity. When we wrote the purchasing policy, and Trustee Bockhorst will remember, as she was also on the budget committee at that time, we debated at the very end. I was in favor of utilizing, similar to the city of Milwaukee and some other communities around us, but when you rate your proposals, or you, in this instance, when you look at a TID application, giving extra points when you're rating proposals during bidding process, but you would give extra points for those applications that utilize contractors of whatever you want to define it, protective class. You can define it as disadvantaged business enterprises, which would include women, but whatever definition you're using, you would give extra points so that that application would rise in the bidding process. And they can be awarded the contract. In this instance, for TIDs, I would highly recommend that we do not give extra undefined incentives to an undefined protected class. I would rather, and I'm suggesting that you would favor or give more weight to an application for TID assistance that did utilize, that proposed to utilize. I mean, they know who their subcontractor, not all of them, but proposed to utilize a certain percentage of their subcontractors as meeting our definition. I certainly am opposed to not defining what kind of incentive would be given out. Financial, more zoning, more height. If you use contractors of a certain color or a certain gender, I would require it. If you're going to take our taxpayer money, then you are going to, either you're going to get more points and your application is going to come above the rest, or you're required to do 5% or 10%, but make it equal for everyone. To say, we'll look more favorably upon your application and we'll give you money or some sort of incentive that I don't know who defines after the fact I've just never heard of that. I think it's very case by case. And I think that it would depend on which board, village board or CDA members were on the board, and it's going to change from development to development. And I think it's not a good practice. I think I would suggest that we either require it in our policy, a certain percentage is used, of subcontractors that meet our definition of disadvantaged or whatever we're defining, or we look more favorably, but I would not just come up with an incentive case by case of what that incentive is in the end. So, Attorney Bear?
Thank you. Just on that point, I just wanted to mention that by way of example, the state of Wisconsin has something called the Minority and Disabled Veterans Owned Business Certification Program. And it's a pretty rigorous process where they have they have 3 different categories. They have minority owned business enterprise, so you can put in an application and qualify for that. They have a separate one for women-owned business enterprise, and there's a separate application process where you have to fill out a bunch of information and specific criteria for that. And then you have a disabled veteran-owned business enterprise. And the purpose of the state program is to give preference to those qualified businesses that meet the rigorous standard, and then to promote those types of businesses within the state of Wisconsin. So just as by way of example, these you might be dealing with contractors who may have worked with the state as well and already have these certifications, but just by way of example, I thought that might be germane to your discussion.
Thank you. And I do understand that some people are, I mean, you can define it any way you want. I understand that we want to promote diversity. So for the first point of how do you define it, that's up to us. I mean, you can define it. Milwaukee says here, it's women, it's people of color, it's blah, 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 blah. They all qualified as disadvantaged. We just haven't determined, or you can say whoever has a state certification, or you can say whoever meets the federal law. But you got to say what you mean. I mean, you got to define it somehow, whether we'll tie it to something. I think that was Trustee Bachhorst's point. My point's more specific about incentives tying. You can either require it to get our money from the public. You can require that there's a certain percentage of contractors that are of disadvantaged class, whatever that may be defined as, or you can incentivize it. Either one, I prefer to require it, but if you incentivize it, you can't incentivize it on a case-by-case basis saying, we'll decide, because then you've got different board members the next time. It just becomes very unfair. And we're government. So I think it's very important that government is consistent, that if you meet this definition and this criteria, you will get an extra 2% of the money we give you, or you'll get an extra, $5,000, or you'll get an extra, but what are you getting? And so to leave it up in the air and for someone to decide in the future is very, it's not an even playing field for the developers. And I wouldn't vote for that. So I don't care which one it is. I prefer it be a requirement. I did in the purchasing policy as well. I didn't get my way on that one, but when we go to phase 2 of the purchasing policy, hopefully we'll get there. So with that, I had a couple of changes. I'll just reiterate them. I think that I'm suggesting before I could approve the document, we include some sort of language, whether it's a requirement in the policy for some sort of green infrastructure, a percentage of the project, or it's an incentive, which is defined for green infrastructure. If you meet these qualifications, you will get an extra X. I think the same thing goes for the disadvantaged class. We define it, and then we either offer a requirement in our policy or a defined incentive. I appreciate the consultant talking about the feasibility study and just further making sure that the financial feasibility is assessed before the term sheet gets to us. And I also feel very strongly that about Trustee Amenta's statement that purely tax increment increase is not enough to receive funding from the taxpayers, because anything that's built can do that. I think it has to meet another public goal as well. And lastly, I feel really strongly about no funding for market rate or luxury housing. There's no need for it in Shorewood. When there becomes a need at some point, we can change the policy. But at this point, I'd make it very clear. Again, developers love consistency and they want to know right up front. They don't want to waste their time. So if this board feels that market rate and luxury housing should not be tax funded, then we should say it and not waste their time. Thank you. Trustee Amenta, and then Peter.
I want to say I agree with you 100% on the luxury housing issue. I don't see any reason we don't need to subsidize housing for people who are wealthy. And I did bring that up at the CDA and was kind of outvoted on that one at the CDA, but I do support that. Thanks.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, I was just curious with respect to the protected class discussion and the green. I'm curious if that is actually more of a village board, that's a policy that should be at the village board with respect to those. And then, because this applies to many other committees and many other activities of the village. And so I guess I want to avoid us having a certain criteria. And then, as you said, purchasing is different. So would it,
Sure.
and I'm just proposing.
Oh, I
this,
so
would it be
agree.
that
We can-
it's fine, and then in this policy we say we conform to the village's policy with respect to green infrastructure and or, because again, I don't want us to create something here and 5 years from now we're kind of off track.
It's different. This is talking about giving out money. And so when you give out money, you can decide who you're going to give it to and who you're giving preferential treatment to. I do agree. I think, I don't know one trustee on our board that doesn't probably agree with the statement that we need a village-wide policy on when we do purchasing. So purchasing meaning when we actually purchase goods or contracts,
Which is the
what is our
same
policy?
giving
It
them
which
money.
would define it, but this is a
Well,
little
that's giving
different.
too.
Right. So now's our time to define it because we have it in our policy, and I wouldn't want to hold up this policy on a village-wide policy on purchasing. So my initial, what I would suggest from one person on this board is I would go with what Milwaukee classifies as the disadvantaged. They have a disadvantaged certification list for businesses and contractors. And why create the wheel? We're 5 minutes from them,
Yeah.
and they have much more staff than we do. So in my opinion, the easiest way to do it is to define it the way the city of Milwaukee does.
And that's my only concern was more just consistency across the various entities that support the village. I don't want the CDA to end up being an outlier in the way it's viewing either of those. And you can always write into the policy, here's the definition, we're going to do this, unless there is a village-wide policy which will trump it. I mean, you can always do it that way so that it wouldn't be inconsistent. You wouldn't have to change it, and village ordinance would always come first. And then on your comment on market rate, I'm curious how, and again, many of you are much more versed in development, but for a development that includes some, it's got market rate, but it also has subsidized elements to it. Do you then just carve out that portion, and that portion is available for,
No.
or is not at all? That whole project is not allowed for TIF?
No, of course, in my opinion, whenever a village or whenever a municipality in the past has said luxury housing and market rate housing are not applicable, it's typically, if you have a housing project or a mixed use project and there's not affordable housing in it, it doesn't have to be all of it, but then you're not eligible. I mean,
Perfect.
the housing portion, is not be eligible. But if there's affordable housing, most of the time, unless you're the federal, it's a federal housing authority project, money from the federal government like that, where the municipality is building the housing authority. That's really when it's the only time that affordable housing is solely built. So I think it's always usually mixed use. So as long as there's an affordable component to it, it typically qualifies.
So there could be both. If it's a development that includes affordable and market rate, if we put in a statement about we don't approve of TIFs for market rate housing, if a developer comes with a project that includes housing that's like the Light Horse, that includes some subsidized and some and market rate, Are we allowing that for an application or not?
All I'm saying, that's for us to decide. I'm just giving history that in other municipalities, yes, that you could apply. There's some sort of affordable component.
So at this point, do we want this to, try to have staff redo some language? Do we send it back to the CDA? Do we iron this out tonight?
I think there's too much to iron out, in my opinion. Maybe we, at this point, if we can just talk about some of the things that were suggested to see if there's any agreement that might help direct staff of what to do. There was a lot of suggestions tonight, and so I think I can go through them and we can just see if there's any disagreement or different ideas. Like, for instance, defining disadvantaged class, protected class. I think, is there anyone that doesn't believe we need to do that?
President Rozak?
Yes. Trustee Bachor, sorry, I can't see you on my screen. Yes.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate, I kind of unclear about the process tonight. I don't really agree with going through without getting a consensus from the group as to what we want to do going forward, so that we do have a lot of other items on the agenda. And, so I would feel it most helpful if we all get to have some input on this and how we want to see the next step. And I agree with you completely regarding, I think there are a lot of changes that need to be made and a lot of questions and ambiguities. I think this was a great first go round, a great draft to bring us, but it is a very big decision tonight to be making as we're kind of, how do you call it, editing and designing by committee. In some ways, if we're going to go line item straight through, this is not best practices as far as forming a policy is concerned. So I would say that we have a lot of us, I'm sure many of you have additions or questions or things that you want. And now that we've had the conversation publicly, because I'm not on the CDA, I haven't spoken with Kathy, David, or anyone in advance of this meeting regarding this, but I've got to hear a lot of the concerns from other board members. And anyway, so I agree that bringing this back is a good idea. And I think in order to get there, we kind of have to agree on, or not even to get there, but if that's what we're going to do, if a decision needs to be made tonight, I don't think there is one. I hate to make big decisions based on unnecessary urgency. We designed the mask policy by committee because we were in a pandemic and we had to do it. We don't have to design this tonight. I think it would be irresponsible of us, as well as not using and kind of not the best thing for the CDA as well, you know, given the hard work they've put into it, for us to just come in and make, you know, sweeping changes at a board meeting and then vote on it. So that would be one of the things. But I'll reserve the rest of my questions based on the process that's going to be delineated for going forward tonight.
Thank you. And I certainly agree with you 100% that we wouldn't be making any decisions tonight, that we are just trying to give staff some direction on the suggestions that were made.
I have more suggestions is what I'm saying, is if we're going to just go on those, then okay, but there are other suggestions that I think I and maybe others have. I'm not sure.
Go ahead.
Interruption.
Please say them.
Sorry?
Please say them. We're in a public setting. It's better than emailing them. Could you say what your suggestions are?
Sure. One of them is I completely agree with the green infrastructure. And this leads to something else, though. This is just one of the many elements that we have in this village that we've spoken of. And I agree with, I think it was you, President Rozak, that all of a sudden we don't want to come up and define different goals for our village, such as a green village, or actually many of the items that are delineated in Vision 2025, which will need a nice robust updating since it's just a few years away. So these components, I'm not sure, maybe I missed this in the memo, but how many of these and the Central District Master Plan and other plans and items that have been adopted by previous boards, et cetera. And then I also, a lot of the rhetoric that's used in here, I have not found this in any other TIF policy or program across the state of Wisconsin yet. We use, and these are things that, again, like this is a public meeting, our emails are public as well, but I will go ahead and give you what I have just on this first go round, but I will have more, I'm sure, to send to the village. But so we say there are a variety of things in here too, like how much assistance and this and that you're looking for. Even the title of the document was, I forget what it is. Sorry, there's so many pages here too. Shorewood Public Assistance Application. So I have that. I agree with what you said, President Rozek, as well as Attorney Bear, that the state of Wisconsin does have programs, and then other municipalities do. Sorry, Rebecca, you have your hand. Do you need to jump in now, or are you just getting in the queue?
Well, I just wanted to, we have Michaela Hood on the line from Baker Tilly, and we've gone far past the time period that I thought we were going to allot for this. So if it's okay with the board, I'd like to let her go from the call at this time, since the board is at a point of providing some direction.
Does she need to hear the direction? Is she going to be helping you with the writing of whatever we're suggesting, or?
She will be. I'm trying to be cognizant of time.
Sure.
I just
Okay.
looked down and it's 9:08 already. And I appreciate all this positive feedback. I mean, this is
Okay.
we want it, but if we could potentially recap, because I know we also have a number of other items.
So you want to let her know that she can leave the conversation? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but if there's something that's going to relate to her in terms of the policy, that she could stay, but I just wanted to be cognizant of the time.
And Rebecca, I'm okay to stay on.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Trustee Bockhorst.
Thank you. Again, with the state of Wisconsin programs that are already in existence, and I'm not trying to pick apart, it's a lot easier. Let me just back up and say it's a lot easier to come in from the outside and, point at all the things that you'd like differently. So please don't see this in any way as being disparaging of the process and the many hours that the CDA members have put into this. So I agree with you, though, President Rozek, that there is a lot that probably needs to be tidied up and maybe further defined, etc. And I would, especially with what you said regarding the case-by-case basis, I think that to me smells of Cook County, Illinois in many ways, and it's not a good position to put anyone in, our staff in, board members, etc. Clear, defined definitions of what the incentives are, what we're talking about, really make it a lot easier for everyone. Ambiguity, and let's put this out there, ambiguity with this board, not knowing, I think it's for anyone who would like to invest in this community, knowing the clear goals and what we're looking for is, especially since we involve ourselves very early in the process, according to the timeline and the application process. When I say we, the village board, with the developers right before they submit the $8,000 or whatever it is for the phase 2, phase 3. So knowing what they're getting into and what they can get from this is a lot better than, again, a reward on case by case. And it protects us as well as village board members, because we don't get into any potentially legal jams as far as that's concerned. Even regarding the money, I understand, I was looking because it's the Department of, Community Development that manages and all of these in the city of Milwaukee. They have over 100 active TIF districts in the city of Milwaukee. We have 1.5 square miles here. So we have 4 that are open. So even the $5,000 based on what Milwaukee gets is to me a little, maybe not the most fair situation, but I could be mistaken on that. Again, I would want to ruminate on this a little bit more. Let's see.
Can I just to be respectful of time, do you have any other, other than the things that have been brought up, do you have any other suggestions that the village, to add or to take away that have not been discussed yet?
That's what I'm getting to.
Okay.
But it's, again, are we going through the entire, is that what we're going to spend the rest of I think we should kind of figure out what our next steps are so it can inform this process.
That's what I'm trying to do. So there have been some suggestions for added language or some suggestions for additional things to be put into the documentation. And I was just going to go through them quickly and make sure there was no disagreement on them. But if there is additional things that any trustee or board member may have, we should probably air those, just say what they are so that they're on the list.
Sure. Well, okay, just to be fair, though, this is the first round we've gotten together as a village board to discuss this. So
Sure,
we might
at
have
this
things that come up later. This is not our unique opportunity to have
Right.
discussion on this, unless we're saying that we're going to take a vote tonight, which you and I seem to be in agreement with, that we don't feel that's the case, correct?
Correct. Correct.
Can I suggest that President Rosick be allowed to go
Trista.
through the issues and that, you know, we do a raise of hands just to see if there's 4 votes for things. If there's
No,
not 4.
okay, and I would like to finish.
You know, you've had the floor for a really long time. We've all listened to you for quite a long time. I think all of us would like to proceed and move on to the rest of the meeting. And I don't know for many of the things that have been discussed, if there's 4 votes for things. So I think we just need to go down a list, see who supports it and who doesn't. And then staff has the information to be able to come back with another version.
Well,
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I have not recognized you, Trustee Bockhorst, again.
No,
I'm
she stole
going
the
to
floor from me, President
point.
Rosick. No. it's
Okay,
my-
so this is how we are going to proceed. We are going to run down the list and see if there is anyone who disagrees. Just show your hands so that staff has some direction of what to come back to us with. It does not mean you're voting for anything formally. It does not mean you can't change your mind at the next meeting. It does not mean new issues cannot come up at the next meeting. It is simply just to recap what we've done tonight so that we don't lose it and that staff has some direction.
Point of clarification then. I have a point of clarification regarding.
And you're asking the
Okay.
chair, point of clarification, go ahead and ask your question.
So I assume that most people would like a comprehensive overview of what we're looking at instead of, you know, again, if you're going to.
Is that your question? Point of
It's part of my
clarification is a question.
Yes, I'm giving you a little background for my question. So in order for us to rank these or vote on them, don't we need to kind of see I know I need to see a plan and a comprehensive thing, not let's take this, let's take this. I don't even know the pulse of this board as far as if they want to.
What is the clarification question you are asking? Otherwise I will de-recognize you. Is there a question?
Yes. Are we
Go ahead and
going
ask your
to-
question.
Are we going to hear the overall additions or are we going to pick it apart piece by piece?
Okay, the answer is we are going to follow the following process. I can repeat it. I'm going to state something that has been said, and I'm going to see if there's any disagreement with that statement of moving forward so staff can place it into the document. If there is more than 4, there's 7 of us. If 3 people disagree or more than 3 people, then staff should not move forward with that. It'd be a waste of time at this time. So the first thing is, do we want staff to further define disadvantaged class? If you do, please just show of hands if we should further define that in some fashion. Okay, looks like you should further define that. Secondly, I think there is a statement that Trustee Amenta had made. She suggested stating we should not only, it should be written or changed in the document that to specify increase in tax base cannot be the only reason a TID would move forward. Is there agreement with that statement? Okay, there is at least 5. I think you should go ahead and move forward with that change. We can vote on that. We can take it out at the next meeting when we vote. This is just asking staff, giving them some direction. Third thing was green infrastructure. Should we include should staff move forward with including language that addresses green infrastructure? If you agree that they should, raise your hand. Looks like some sort of statement with green infrastructure would be good. The market and luxury housing as solely development of market and luxury housing, should that be disqualified from an application process? If you agree with that, raise your hand.
Clarifying point of order.
Yes.
Will we also include, Trustee Stoker-Brand mentioned the hybrid component of there would be both affordable and market rate. Are we also going to have that language in?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So raise your hand if you agree that luxury and market housing only, if that's the only thing being developed, should be disqualified from the application.
Yep.
Okay, and then I don't know that I don't know that we can decide the second part, but at least there's something to do with luxury and market, and we can decide that at the next meeting, but let staff figure out some language. Was there anything further? Oh, for disadvantaged class, the requirements, should staff look into defining incentive, what the incentive would be if they meet the disadvantaged contracting requirement, and or should they move forward with a requirement? So making it more defined. Okay. Is there any other suggestion that came up tonight, Trustee Stokebrand, that I forgot? I see your hands up.
Give the $5,500 fee a label application and make the $8,000 a study fee. And also include language that makes it clear that it'd be and costs above $8,000 as required.
Thank you so much.
Possibly be refunded, right?
Yep.
Third party,
So
something.
further defining that language. Anyone agrees? Raise your hand to define. Okay. All right. So we have enough hands. Those points that have been made should be further explored. If there's anything I forgot, please let me know. And if there's anything in addition, it's time to talk about it. Trustee Bockhorst.
Is this our only opportunity to add additional comments? Because I was cut off from saying mine before by Trustee Menta and you. I'm sure other board members don't just process and synthesize everything in one meeting and based on a show of hands, not even knowing if we're using any other plans or any other things in the past. So will we have more than one meeting on this, or is this just going to go back to staff and come to us? I think this process is highly irresponsible and irregular.
Okay, so at this point, everybody who's made a suggestion for that they know of tonight has made it tonight, and we just recap those. If there's further suggestions about including language on other plans, or if you have a further suggestion tonight, we're not voting on anything, but if you do, please let us know as a board. If you remember something or you think of something and you want to talk about it next time, we certainly can do that as well. We're not voting on anything tonight.
Can I just
have another round to discuss this was my question before we vote, because I think the fact that we just raised hands and went through a few things and really didn't.
Go ahead. If you have any further suggestions or want to have some comments, it's your time. Yes, Trustee Bockhorst.
That wasn't my question. So you're saying what I'm hearing from you then, President Rozek, is tonight is my only opportunity or anyone's opportunity. Is that correct?
Not correct. Would you like the floor?
No, I think I've said enough. I'm ready to move on.
Okay, Trustee Menta.
I just want to say, you know, we're all provided with a packet and a meeting time to discuss things. And it's assumed that we all read the packet and come up with our questions and our opinions on things. So I'm not sure why we have to continue to, I don't understand this whole line of questioning about continuing to agendize something that we've already had on a public agenda, had an opportunity to read, review, and ask questions.
President Rozek.
Thank you so much, Trustee Menta. Okay, so if anybody has any further suggestions that need to be discussed tonight, we do have another meeting. Obviously, we're not taking a vote tonight. So any concluding comments or suggestions? Peter.
Can I just ask one clarifying on the green infrastructure? So on the protected class, the village board would like the incentives clarified. Correct? I totally agree. We will come back with not just a general incentive concept, but actual incentives that are delineated. Is the board also requesting that clear definition of incentives for the green infrastructure component as well? That applies to that.
Let me answer what we wrapped up, just in my opinion. Definition of whether you're required to use a disadvantaged contractor, you know, percentage or whatever of contractors, or whether you are not required, but you're going to get an incentive. What is that? Yes. So you're defining that incentive, right?
Yes. So does that same comment apply for the green infrastructure?
I would assume so if it's going to be in the incentive form.
But again, only because you called that out specifically for the protected. Yep. I just want to make
it would be great to have something proposed.
Yes. Okay.
So that we can discuss.
Yep.
Trustee, thank you. Did you have anything else, Peter,
Thank
before I move?
you very much. I'm sorry that took so long.
Oh, no, I think it's great conversation. Thank you. And thank you so much for your time on that. Trustee Bockhorst.
Yes, thank you. So I'm wondering why this is going to the full board and not to committee prior to reaching it, because, and I'd ask that I'm not interrupted by Trustee Amento or you, President Rozek, because it's a highly unusual process to, yes, we all read the packet, we all synthesize, but this is our one and only opportunity to talk about this from what I'm hearing. And usually in committee, that's where you hash out these things across the board in municipalities across the state and nation. That's what goes on. But yet there are two of the trustees that are on the CDA, Trustee Stokerbrand and I believe Trustee Amenda. So I know that you two have had a lot more opportunity to speak of these things and synthesize and ask questions and probably speak with each other as well. But we're being brought a policy, a TIF policy, written by a committee, right, of this Community Development Authority, okay? I have a lot of questions. I'm sure the public has a lot of questions because this is going to govern how we evaluate and incentivize projects within our municipality. So if this is our unique opportunity to discuss this as a board, it's highly unorthodox. It's I'm not sure what kind of a process and that this comes from, but we're talking about a policy here, guys. And I know I stated before that a policy is a living document, but we all know how difficult it is to change anything and even get through an agenda at times. So I would ask that we're clear tonight when we exit this meeting or exit this topic on what the next steps are, as far as what staff expects from us, what the Community Development Authority understands and expects, as well as the rest of the trustees. So that's where I'm going.
Okay, thank you so much. Rebecca, Peter, I'm going to conclude this discussion now with this question to you both. Do you have enough information to proceed to the next step and bring something back to the village board?
I believe that I have enough, and if Peter, you would like to ask more questions, I'm all ears to hear them. I just wanted to get a firm understanding. So the direction from the board to go back to the CDA with this information, work on that, and then bring forth a revised draft? Or to Trustee Bockhorst's point, would you like me to engage a standing committee? And I will take the ownership of bringing it to the board. There was no
I see what you're asking.
received direction before to go to a
Thank
standing
you.
committee. So
I would not suggest bringing it to a standing committee. CDA is similar and it's standalone. It has two
Elected.
on it. It is a committee, and therefore it has gone to committee. If we want suggested changes that are significant enough in you and Peter's mind that it needs to go back to that committee before you bring it back to us as a village board, please do so. If you both believe that it's not significant enough to go back to the CDA and that the village board can handle it and you can make those with your consultant, please bring it directly back to the village board. Thank you.
I guess my question is, and maybe this is getting to a bit of Trustee Bockhorst, is so the I don't know, 5 points of clarification that were requested is that it?
No.
Because we would, I just personally, if I would prefer to have all of the comments, all of the recommended changes comprehensively so that I go to my committee once.
Thank you. Okay, this is how we're going to proceed. Take it back to the CDA if you're not feeling comfortable. Every trustee has every opportunity to participate in any committee of the village. And so as we do for any other committee, if you are a trustee on this board and you're not a committee member, feel free to attend the next CDA meeting when this is discussed. Otherwise, it will come back to the village board and you'll have your opportunity to weigh in on whatever is being presented to us. We have asked for more information. We have shown a hands of what those topics would be. I have asked 100 times tonight if you have other things that you would like to see discussed or evaluated when it goes back to the CDA or when it comes back before it comes back to us, to bring them up tonight. So what has been brought up tonight, please bring back to the CDA. Any trustee that would like to participate in that conversation and bring up other items at that time, feel free to do so. That's what we do when we participate in committee meetings. And then you can bring it back to the village board and we will have another opportunity. With that, I'm going to conclude this item and we're going to move to the next one. Thank you so much for everybody's participation. Our next item on the agenda is item number 5, consent agenda. Items under the consent agenda may be acted upon by one motion. If in the judgment of any village board member, a consent agenda item needs further discussion, the term can be placed in the items removed from the consent agenda. Sarah, do we say motion to approve the consent agenda before we ask for items removed?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay, moved by trustee Warren, second by trustee Menta. Is there any items that would like to be removed? No. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Go ahead, Sarah, and call the roll.
Trustee Menta,
Aye.
trustee Warren,
Aye.
trustee Bachhorst,
Yes.
trustee Stokebrand,
Aye.
trustee Carpenter,
Aye.
trustee Ursink,
Aye.
President Rosick.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. We have no items under number 6 removed from the consent agenda. We'll move to number 7. Tonight we have no public hearings. Number 8, citizens to be heard. This item is for matters that are not on the agenda. Discussion may follow comment on non-agenda items, or discussion and action may come at a future meeting. Is there anybody signed up to speak under citizens to be heard?
No one has signed up ahead of time. So if there's anybody at this time, if you could raise your virtual hand or unmute yourself and state your name and address.
No?
I think we can move on. Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to number 9, new business. Is there anybody that would like a 5-minute break before we move on to new business? Okay, let's take a 5-minute recess. The time is, somebody say the time. Claire?
9:28.
9.
It's 9:28.
9:28. So we will be back in 5 minutes to re-adjourn and continue on with new business. Thank you. Sarah, can you just let me know? My time's different on my computer than yours.
Yep, we're at 9:35, so I just need one more person. We can get back to order. Okay, we have 4, so you can proceed.
4. Okay. Okay, welcome back. We will now reconvene the village board meeting. It is 9:36. We'll go on to 9, new business. 9A, consider 2021 alley reconstruction project scope of work. I see Leanne, are you on the call?
I am here. Good evening. You'll recall that Sigma was present at one of your May Village Board meetings, and we presented the scope of the 2021 alley project. We noted at that time that there was likely not sufficient funding for all of the alleys that had been previously identified through the long range plan program. And at that time, we all agreed that we would continue with the engineering for all of the alleys. And then at the time of bid award, we would use a structure of base bid with various alternates so that we could award as many alleys as funding would allow. Recall that of the alleys identified, 3 of them had green components. And one of those, Alley A, which is located west of Morris, north of Pinedale, and south of Capitol, we have found through initial engineering and inspection has some pretty significant drainage issues. In order to address those issues, we will likely need to develop some sort of an easement through some adjacent properties and exit that stormwater out to Capitol Drive, which, as you can imagine, is certainly not impossible, but is going to take a little bit of time. So we are proposing that Alley A be removed from the 2021 program. We would further propose that the green infrastructure or the green solutions funding that had been earmarked or identified for that alley be held. We can certainly use that funding for the proposed Hubbard Park parking lot project, which we will be putting some engineering selection in front of you in the very near future. But that is also a project that has real potential for green infrastructure, and we certainly can utilize that funding for that project. So what we're looking for tonight is your concurrence and your direction that we move ahead with the bidding of the alley project with Alley A removed from that scope of work.
And nothing being replaced, just removed, correct?
Correct. That would allow all of the remaining alleys to be, well, based on the engineer's opinion of probable cost, that would allow then all the remaining alleys to be constructed within the funding available. And alleys G and H would remain as green alley construction.
It looks like President Rozak is gone.
Yeah, no, she's dropped off my screen too.
You're up, Kathy.
Yeah.
I don't see her, Kathy. I'm sorry. If she comes back, I'll let you know.
I heard a door.
I
Oops.
did have a question also.
Okay, questions? Trustee Carpenter.
Okay. So is the only reason for removing Alley A because the green alley is not possible at this time? And so it's sort of a 2-part question. And then do you think that it will be possible in the future? It just will take more engineering to accomplish the green, that alley being a green alley?
So that's not the the green infrastructure is not really the reason that we're proposing the alley be removed. Like many of our alleys, when they're in bad condition, they're usually in pretty bad condition because they have drainage issues. This one has a pretty significant drainage issue. So regardless of whether it's reconstructed as a green alley or just a conventional alley, we need to address the water there. And in order to do that, because the alley slopes away from Morris, but we need to somehow get the water back to Morris. It appears that the most cost-effective way to do that is actually to run that water north out to Capitol. The elevations and the grades just work much better. That's not really something that we can accomplish in the next month. That's going to be a bit of a process. So we can't reconstruct alley A in either green or conventional without addressing that water issue. And we need to do that. And then once that has occurred, it would absolutely be my intention to recommend that at the time of reconstruction, it be reconstructed with green infrastructure features, definitely.
Okay, and you think that moving those funds towards the Hubbard Park parking lot, rather than moving up another alley, is the right direction to go in?
Yes, as we talked about back in May, of the alleys that are identified in this year's project, it was only really those three that had suitable infrastructure in place to allow them to cost effectively be built as a green alley. The storm infrastructure that our records indicate exists at the west end of that alley, where it dead ends right behind Culver's, actually does not appear to exist, as we've done field survey and field inspection. So we thought that was a very good candidate for green because of that storm infrastructure. We have a little work to do there. The remaining alleys that were identified for conventional construction were identified that way because they do not have adjacent storm infrastructure where we can direct that overflow. It can be added, but it's a significant expense to do so, and that addition that storm infrastructure would not be a Green Solutions eligible funding component of the project. So the ones that we've identified are the most cost-effective alleys for green infrastructure. And yes, I believe we have huge opportunities in the Hubbard Park parking lot to do some cool things, and this money can be very well spent in that location.
Maybe I should just clarify. So, I mean, there's, a long list of alleys, for the next go around and the next go around. Mm-hmm. I guess that was more what I was saying, like, do you think that would it make more sense to take one of those alleys or two of those alleys versus the Hubbard parking lot?
Well, we could not add any more alleys to this year's project. That bid needs to go out, and it needs to go out within the next week or two. We don't have time to engineer additional alleys. So
got it.
You could roll the money over, but like I said, really great opportunities to do something in Hubbard, and that money can go a long way toward helping that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think President Rosick is back.
Thank you so much, Trustee Stokebrand. My iPad died, so I had to find the plug. I appreciate that. Trustee Amenta.
Yeah, I think what Trustee Carpenter was asking, I had the same question. Since we budgeted $750,000 for alleys for next year, but we're only going to be spending $686. So I understand, Leanne, that we don't have any other alley we could put in there because we haven't engineered it, is what you said, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
But I guess I would just say, and since I won't be involved in next year's budget process or 2 years from now for 2023, but that instead of the 750 that we take the extra 65 or whatever. So basically look to budget 800,000 for alleys, kind of move the appropriation from the 2021 to 2023. So we keep making progress on the alleys. That's just what I would throw in there.
We will not have a 2023 alley program because of the combined Southeast area combined sewers. So I believe our next alley program is slated in the long range financial plan for 2025. But I certainly understand what you're saying.
I have a question about that. So, and this comes up all the time, Trustee Amenta and I bring it up for the last 6 years. If we don't utilize the funding, which we absolutely wanted and appropriated for alleys, then it falls to the bottom line if we don't ask as a board for it to be reappropriated to a different time or to be saved for. So unless we specifically say that is going to be earmarked and then Mark puts it in the budget and says, say we're saving $50,000 by not doing it, $50,000 is reserved. He has a little footnote in the budget and it says, for 2 more years. That's, unless we specifically say that as a board to you, then it falls to the bottom line and it can be used for any overage this year and, or for any project. Is that correct? I mean, where does that funding go that we don't utilize?
I'm not certain that's the case in this instance because that really is a Mark question. I think that the answer to that is it depends on whether the alley funding was bonded or it was levy funded. If it was bonded, then under the terms of that bonding, the money has to be used with certain restrictions within a certain period of time.
Infrastructure projects, I understand.
Right.
We have the.
If it's levy funded, then absolutely you're falling to the bottom line and earmarked is absolutely.
So I would request, just as Trustee Amenta has, that this money, if it was bonded, be specifically saved and earmarked for alleys, whatever year that may be. And if
I don't believe that time frame would allow that. I mean, it's 2021.
Well, then
I
not
don't
to
know
utilize
that we
it
can
and
hold the
not,
bonded
how do
funds
you?
for 4 years.
So we do this every year and I have the same concern every year that when we save money on something that we don't save any money. And so it's not like, as Trustee Menta is saying, next year we get to do more alleys because we didn't do it this year. No, because we didn't not bond for the money if it was bonded for. So we can't, according to Mark, give it back. So then we just utilize it for something. And that really takes it out of the hands of the village board and the elected officials. And so if you want to let us know what the money is going to be utilized for, that'd be great. But I am very uncomfortable, as I always am, when we say we're saving money and we don't save it.
Certainly, if it's used for any type of infrastructure project, there is no infrastructure work that is ever done without village board review and approval. So I understand your concern, but please be assured that if that money were to be used on any future project, it could not be done so without village board approval. And it would not be done without board approval.
But where would it go? Because
I don't have an answer at this point. It like I said, that's really a Mark question. It depends in large part whether the alleys are bonded, will be bonded, or are funded through tax levy. And I can contact Mark and I can work that out and we can certainly get you that information.
Trustee Amenta?
Yeah, I mean,
And Trustee Ursink?
when I've talked in the past about like, can we really do capital budgeting? What that would mean is that it's like a separate bucket for alleys. So we would have appropriated 750, we spent 686, that appropriation would stay in that bucket for alleys. So we'd be budgeting separately for capital projects. So that, I mean, this is a good example of one of the benefits of actually having capital budgeting.
Thank you. Trustee Ursink.
I was going to say, for the sake of time, without Mark being here, I think this is a conversation that he should probably be a part of. I don't see it going anywhere unless he's here and he can kind of define some of this stuff. So, wondering.
Do you want to move to defer?
Move on with this.
Are you making a motion to defer?
No.
Okay, thank you.
I'll
Trustee Stokebrand.
I move the approval of the removal of alley A from the 2021 alley reconstruction project deferment of its reconstruction to the planned 2025 program and approve utilization of unallocated MMSD Green Solutions funding for the 2021 Hubbard Park parking lot reconstruction.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further questions? I have one. Leanne, when you say there's many opportunities in the Hubbard Park parking lot, I'm so in agreement that the green alleys were way overpriced for what the pollution that we actually is reduced. And so I'm excited to hear there's more opportunity in Hubbard Park parking lot. Can you just define what they may be? Is there anything other than is there anything other than pavers?
I think there's certainly the potential for some bioswales, and there may be, other options. We had the engineering proposals for Hubbard Park parking lot were due Friday. They are going to go in front of the Public Works Committee on Monday, February 1st, and they'll be making, my hope is they'll be making a recommendation to the village board for an engineering contract award at your meeting on February 15th. Part of that scope has that engineer doing different green infrastructure evaluations for Hubbard. And we will be coming back to the board this spring to talk about what those options are, what the relative benefit is for the costs, and have that conversation. So
thank you.
There's a couple things we can do, and we'll see.
Great. And the only reason I brought that up to the board is because we spend an awful lot of money on green alleys, and I know we want to do things that are green, but I'm very excited to hear the Hubbard Park analysis, because when we did Wilson Drive, bioswales were way more effective at reducing pollution for the amount of money that you pay for each dollar that you pay in. So very excited to hear that. Thank you. I just want to say I'll be voting no on this because I don't want to take the money and let it drop to the bottom line and not once again complete our alley program at the budgeted amount. So with that, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, go ahead, Sarah, and take the roll.
Trustee Warren.
Aye.
Trustee Carpenter.
No.
Trustee Bachhorst.
We're not going to hear public comment. Aye.
No.
Trustee Stokebrand.
Aye.
Trustee Ursink.
Aye.
Trustee Amenta.
Aye.
President Rosick.
No.
Motion passes 4-2. 5-2, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-2. Our next order of business is 9B, consider Atwater Beach temporary erosion protection.
You'll recall that this summer, staff came to you with a couple of options for temporary protection of the boardwalk at Atwater. We were very concerned about potential winter damage to the boardwalk structure because of the high lake levels. And we had a consultant come in and give us a couple of ideas. Staff put those in front of the board, and the board directed staff to proceed with a method that includes a geotextile type of bag that is generally filled with sand, stone, or concrete, and is used as a temporary protective measure. That is something that in most cases is best done by a contractor. We had significant issues lining up a contractor to do that work, and only recently received a confirmation from one of those that we reached out to that they were interested and willing to do the job. Because of the late date and because of some of the changing conditions and a request from a trustee, I'm just bringing this back to ask you to confirm or at least review that decision. Many of the predicted environmental conditions, I'm going to call them, did not come to pass. The lake level has actually dropped since we had that conversation. The ice cover is nowhere near what it was this time last year. And so it does not appear that, you know, and I'm knocking on wood right now as I'm saying this, it doesn't appear that we're going to see many of the conditions that we did last winter that caused damage to the boardwalk structure. So you had earmarked an amount of up to $50,000 to put this temporary protection in. One of the things that I did particularly want to do is make sure that you understand what that protection will look like. And how it will impact access to the beach and boardwalk. The memo that was included in your packet has a picture that I actually dropped right into the memo text. This is a little bit more significant than we would be doing at Atwater Beach, but the look would be the same. These are black geotextile bags. They would have to be buried. We would need 2 rows of them. The row that would be immediately adjacent to the lake side of the boardwalk would actually have to extend to provide full protection at least 6 inches above the level of the boardwalk. So that would be 2 rows of bags. The first one would be dug in partially and about half covered. And then the second row of bags would sit directly on top of that and would extend above the top of the boardwalk. It would not remove any of the vegetation that currently exists. That provides great natural protection, and we don't want to disturb that in any way. So it would run along the edge of the boardwalk up to the areas where we have established sand dunes and other vegetation, and then pick up again on the other side of that. And then there would be a second row of bag right in front of just one layer or one level in front of the first, in front of the row that would be basically touching the edge of the boardwalk. So that picture in your memo kind of gives you an indication of what it would look like from the lake. If you were standing in the lake and looking back at the boardwalk, that is what you would see. We could ultimately, there is some possibility of covering those bags with sand and then working again to plant and establish any type of vegetation to hold those in. But you recall, this is not a permanent solution. These are intended as temporary measures. So aesthetically, it would be, I don't think it's a look people would absolutely fall in love with. It would provide protection to the boardwalk. But as I said, we're not seeing the environmental conditions this winter that everyone was projecting. So I think that the level of risk for significant boardwalk damage right now is much lower than we thought it would be 6 months ago. So at this point, if we were to order, we have not ordered the bags, but we could do so. We could probably have them within 2 weeks. At this point, if you gave me the go ahead this evening, these this would not likely be installed until mid to more likely late February. You know, at that point, generally speaking, the risk of the severe winter storms is primarily past. So we really just we're looking to kind of revisit this discussion and determine if this is still the direction you would like us to proceed.
Thank you, Leanne, and thank you to Trustee Stokebrand for bringing this to the attention of staff. Trustee Stokebrand.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I was the one who brought it up. A community member brought it to my attention that the lake levels had gone down a lot, and so I thought maybe it had been done and I missed it, and it was all hidden and I never noticed it. And so I was glad to get the update from Leanne. I'm just a little confused about, you know, my feeling as I was on the not on the prevailing side of this, so someone else that was on the prevailing side would need to bring this forward for reconsideration, a motion to reconsider. My concern, one of my concerns at the time was that we'd have to dig up the beach grasses that are there to insert the sandbags, and then we'd have to replant the grasses. Is that correct, Leanne? No,
No, we would work. The last thing I want to do is to disturb the established dune grasses. They provide the best protection, natural or otherwise. So no, that the plan was that these bays would be installed adjacent on either end. If you recall, there's a very nicely established grouping of grasses kind of in the center of the northern portion of the boardwalk. So these would go from that point, of the southern portion of the boardwalk, from that point south to the end where it empties into the sand, and then north to another area of trees and dune grass. So it would provide protection in the areas that don't currently have it, but under no circumstances would we be removing anything that's currently established.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Warren? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Trustee Warren.
I think I was on the prevailing side of this before, and I don't know that it's a recon. It's kind of the facts have changed, so we're looking at it. And based on what I'm hearing from Leanne, you know, I'm still kind of formulating my position here, but based on what I'm hearing from Leanne and the fact that, you know, we haven't had the environmental conditions that we expected, and frankly, even if we gave approval tonight, it doesn't go in till essentially the risk has passed. You know, I don't know that there's a lot of benefit in us moving forward with this. I mean, it does protect us against any risk, but that risk is much lower than we expected it to be. And, you know, it's almost past by the time we would get these bags in. So, you know, I'm kind of turning this over in my head. I think this is, but to answer Trustee Stokelbrand, I don't really think it's a motion to reconsider. I think it's kind of, we're looking at it fresh because the facts around it have changed so much. I would view it as a kind of a totally new item that we're taking up tonight.
Well, we did budget it, so correct? Did we budget this?
It was an approved amount, but it was not included in the adopted 2021 budget or 20 budget. It was, my recollection is that it was we'll call it not an approved expenditure funded through capital reserves.
Okay, so it just would stay in capital reserves if we vote tonight to not, it's not a reconsideration of the vote. It's, is Attorney Bear on the line?
Sorry, I was muted there. Yeah, no, I would agree with Trustee Warren.
Sorry, Nathan. Hey, Attorney Bear, we lost you a little bit. It sounds like your audio's a little off.
Sorry, my connection there was cutting in. I would. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yep, it sounds much better now.
Yeah, I don't think it's you have to reconsider because the you're not actually reversing the vote. You're just taking it, making a different policy decision based upon changed circumstances at the Bluff area and the environmental changes that have been made. And it doesn't sound like there was the budget. It didn't actually get into the budget.
Okay, but we are taking a vote tonight, correct?
Yeah, I think that's how it's listed under the. I think there's a suggested motion. I was just looking for that.
Nope.
Does anybody have that?
I did not include a suggested motion.
Oh, okay. So let's take.
But I believe the agenda included consideration.
Oh, it does. Yes, it does use the word consider. So yeah, if you want to do that, you can.
You can consider unfunding something without a reconsideration. Trustee Amenta?
Where are we in terms of contracting? Like, do we have a contract with somebody to do this, and have we spent money, or what? Where are we?
We have a verbal agreement. We don't have anything signed, and we have not spent any money other than a lot of staff time trying to determine how to best go about this.
I mean, when we considered this the last time, it was like very late at the end of the meeting. And after I voted, I had a lot of second thoughts about it, and I talked to Trustee Stokelbrand and was kind of convinced that I probably should not have voted for it. So I will make a motion to, I don't know what the action is, to direct because we didn't fund it, so we can't unfund it, but to abandon the project for what should we call, what is this project called? The temporary?
Yeah, Atwater Beach temporary erosion control measures.
So I'll make a motion that we direct staff to abandon temporary erosion control project at Atwater Park.
And what do you mean by abandon? Can you be specific? Not fund as well?
Well, we have, I mean, I don't think it was in any budget. I mean, it should have been in the 2021 budget. I don't know. With Mark not here, I don't know, Rebecca. Is it in the budget?
It was not in the 2021 budget because at that time, it was our intention to have this completed prior to the end of calendar year 2020. But as I mentioned, we had significant issues. A lot of contractors are very backed up because of COVID. And we did not have anyone who had the work capacity who was able to do it under that timetable.
Okay, so we didn't, it wasn't in 2020 because we were going to use capital reserves and then we didn't budget it because it was supposed to have been done in 20.
Right.
So
No.
I guess.
So just going with that, just a question before you make the motion or before there's, so whenever that happens, Mark always footnotes it in the next budget. So from capital reserves, we had a line, we had in 2021's budgeting, all items that we had already utilized capital reserves for, not utilized, but had reserved or voted on to utilize capital reserves for 2021. And I'm concerned because if we just move to abandon and that was footnoted in the 2021, Mark doesn't just utilize reserves that were funded or approved in 2020 carried over because we didn't know we were abandoning the project to 2021. We had a list. Where does that?
Well, why don't I say an unassign any capital reserves that were assigned to this project?
That would be great.
Okay.
Okay, so can you just state the motion one more time?
So it's direct staff to abandon the project to for erosion control at Atwater Beach and unassign any fund capital reserves that were assigned to the project.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I would like to thank, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Trustee Stokbrand.
I would like to thank Leanne for her work on this. And I think at least we know now if the lake goes up again, we have a contractor, we know the technology that we want. We're in place and hopefully we could, hopefully we won't need to, but we'd be ready. We can certainly use the information going forward if we have to. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? I'm missing a trustee. Okay, seeing.
I noted that this was always a temporary solution and the actual solution is improvement to those groins. And that, we got a little bit of a reprieve, but we should probably be looking forward to planning for that.
Thank you. Okay, with no further comments, go ahead, Sarah, and take the roll.
Trustee Backhorst.
No.
Trustee Carpenter.
Aye.
Trustee Stokebrand.
Aye.
Trustee Ursink.
Aye.
Trustee Menta.
Aye.
Trustee Warren.
Aye.
President Rosick.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-1.
Okay, thank you. Next order of new business is 9C. Consider ordinance 3020, an ordinance amendment to section 225-20 of the Village Code, eliminating code compliance and updating occupancy standards. Rebecca Bart.
I can take this one, President Rosick. So before us tonight is an ordinance to update our code with respect to those two aspects of the Planning and Development Department. As indicated, and as many of you are aware, the state removed or prohibited municipalities from requiring code compliance at the time of sale. That's largely what our code currently includes. And so this ordinance would remove that prohibited language and then clean up some language with respect to how we actually enforce occupancy standards. It's been on my to-do list since I arrived at the village. As mentioned, this was passed in 2016. I started at the very end of 2017. So it's been kind of on the to-do list for a while. I assigned it to our building inspector. So he prepared the draft that we reviewed back in December, and the Community Business Relations Committee also reviewed it at their January 4th meeting. Like I said, there's two primary goals: to remove the prohibition and then to clean up existing language. And so we view it as largely a housekeeping item. But if there's any questions with respect to any of the specifics, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Trustee Ursink,
Just like to make a motion.
go ahead.
So I move to approve ordinance 3020, an ordinance amendment to section 225-20 of the Village Code, eliminating code compliance and updating occupancy standards.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Trustee Ursink, a second by Trustee Warren. Any further discussion? Seeing none, go ahead and take the roll.
Trustee Stokebrand,
Aye.
Trustee Ursink,
Aye.
Trustee Amenta,
Aye.
Trustee Carpenter,
Aye.
Trustee Bachhorst,
Yes.
Trustee Warren,
Aye.
President Rosick.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Now we'll move on to 9D, considering resolution 2021-2, a resolution amending fees within the village fee schedule relative to occupancy permits and tax increment financing requests. I think this needs to be deferred. Is that correct, or Rebecca?
I was going to suggest that you go to strike the language that references TIF requests and proceed with the adoption of occupancy permits.
Okay, and does this relate to the motion that was just made?
Yes.
The item above it?
Mhm.
Okay, any questions? Trustee Warren,
I can take a shot at the motion, I think.
go ahead.
I move to approve resolution 2021-02, a resolution amending fees within the village fee schedule relative to occupancy permits and tax incremental financing requests, removing the section related to tax incremental financing requests.
Second.
You can just,
Oh, can I just cut it off?
yep, you just cut it off. You make
Okay.
your own.
You might, I'll reword it. I move to approve resolution 2021-02, resolution amending fees in the village fee schedule relative to occupancy permits.
Still second. Thank you.
Okay, with no objections for that redo, we will let that stand. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, go ahead and take the roll.
Trustee Ursink.
Aye.
Trustee Stokebrand,
Aye.
Trustee Warren,
Aye.
Trustee Amenta,
Aye.
Trustee Carpenter,
Aye.
Trustee Bachhorst,
Yes.
President Rosick.
Yes,
Motion passes 7-0.
great. We'll move on to 9E, an ordinance. Consider ordinance 3021, an ordinance for face covering requirements during the COVID-19 pandemic. Rebecca, can you clarify? This is identical and just renewing what we've already adopted.
We're just looking to get a new end date for a period of which we will extend the ordinance. So we did consult with the health department. Of course, we would all love to have a crystal ball when it came to COVID and how we can plan, but we don't have one. Director Christensen did suggest looking to extend perhaps for 3 to 6 months or running it consistent with the public health declaration. The governor did extend the face covering executive order by 60 days, but we wanted to hear from the board in terms of what end date they would like to see.
And just to clarify, this is the ordinance that we had adopted for face covering is consistent with what the governor had adopted or put out. Is that correct?
Yes, I don't believe anything has changed
Okay.
since the one that was adopted in 2021, based on the rendition that this is.
Okay. So we're just looking for an end date. Trustee Carpenter, then Trustee Warren, and then Trustee Bachhorst.
I do think ours, for children, we started at 4. I don't know what the state started at. It might have been a different age, but and I've read that even with the vaccinations rolling out, that there will need to be face masks and face coverings worn for potentially a year or more. I would be interested in, it's so hard to give an end date. I mean, I think if we could say when the Wisconsin health crisis is over, and sort of run it concurrently, I think that makes the most sense instead of coming back to this, every couple months.
Health, can we define that? Trustee Warren.
I think, and from my perspective, I think that I'd be in agreement with Trustee Carpenter. I think I would define it as whenever that, I think Governor Evers is an emergency order, whenever that lifts. But I mean, I'd also be curious, does the health department have a recommendation on whether it should be 3 to 6 months or run it concurrently with Governor Evers' order? Is there an opinion there? Because I'm kind of flexible on this one. I can kind of see both sides of it. But I'm just wondering if the North Shore Health Department wants us to go a certain way in terms of end date.
They did not express a preference over the 6-month or public health declaration.
Well, Governor Evers, you mentioned, was 60 days extended. How many days? And the health department you're just mentioned recommending 3 to 6 months. So there are obviously recommendations that are different. So I assume the answer to Trustee Warren's question was our health department said 3 to 6 months. Because of Governor Evers, it's different than the 60 days. Is that correct?
So it's not my understanding that the public health declaration ceases in 60 days.
Oh, okay.
For face masks is my understanding of the 60-day extension. So that maybe that's the clarification.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, can I?
Go ahead, Trustee Warren, you can finish.
Sorry, yeah, I think my understanding is that the public health emergency is different from the actual mask mandate. So the public health emergency, I think, goes on until I would imagine that would go on quite a bit longer than 60 days. So that's my understanding of things.
Okay, so just being consistent, then I think you and Trustee Carpenter are suggesting being consistent with the public health declaration coming from the state. Okay, Trustee Stokebrand. I'm sorry. Did it was Trustee Bachhorst and then Trustee Stokebrand.
Thank you. I have no problem bringing this back in 3 to 6 months. I think this is a valuable discussion, and we don't always have room on the agenda for things, and it's good to get updates from the health director as well as from Rebecca. But at the same time, tying it to the public health emergency is not a bad idea either. Some of the things that we do have to keep under consideration, of course, are the vaccination schedules, and Wisconsin is behind the 8 ball as far as that's concerned. So I would hesitate, and also the makeup of the state legislature. And I understand Evers, it's not a mandate, it's an advisory, and he is going to be a lot more lax than we may be. But again, we can bring this back in 3 to 6 months and make any modifications at that time. As we all know, though, it is a lot more difficult to take something away that does have public safety in mind. For example, stop signs, right? That's an analogy I'm going to use, that to remove a stop sign is almost impossible once it's put in the ground because of the implications, the legal implications on municipalities, as well as other factors. So I would advise against us going too long or tying to something that we really don't have a lot of control over. The public health emergency, if I didn't hear if this was Evers emergency or if we're talking about something proposed by the CDA or anything that or any of those things. So I would go like we did the original order when 4 of us called for the special meeting, is that I would say we tie it to 3 months and then we revise it at that point. We all know this pandemic is not going to be gone in 3 months. And even if some people are vaccinated, we still want to, it's not like we're wearing anything indicating that we're vaccinated or not. So we still have to be responsible and what is the word? Protect the population and anyone who works and visits here as well. So that would be my recommendation, would be to bring it back in 3 months or 6.
3 or 6. Okay, Trustee Stokebrand.
Yeah,
and then
I would think we could just make it for the 3rd. I'm focusing myself on holidays, Memorial Day. So I would recommend that we continue the mask ordinance until we have a meeting on May 17th, I believe. And then we'd be in a position to extend it if we needed to.
So you're picking a specific date, okay? And Trustee Ursink?
Yeah, I agree with them on the same lines as, whether it be, I think every 3 months we should just, it's an easy conversation, and every 3 months we could just have this conversation. And if we're all in agreement, we just keep on going with it. I think that's probably the simplest way to handle it, instead of tying it to whatever the state is doing. But how many months is, where are we at with May 17th? Is that?
It'd be 4 months, about 4 months.
I think that sounds probably reasonable.
It's about the time, well, no, school gets out later.
Okay, thank you. My comment is I would be consistent. I'm in support of what Trustee Warren and Trustee Carpenter have said, tying it to the declaration of the state declaration of a public health emergency by the governor. And that would extend it longer than, it's putting in guarantees, unless we change it or reconsider the vote, but it's putting in guarantees that face masks will be worn until this public emergency is completed. So that is my recommendation, and I will wait for a motion. Trustee.
Oops. Looks like Trustee Stokerbrand's back in the saddle.
I think she was calling on you, Trustee Backhorst.
Trustee
Well,
Bach.
what I was going to say is, before I know President Rozek wanted to tie things with Governor Evers' declaration in the past, and our mask ordinance came out first, and our community appreciated it. We had lots of people lobbying us for this, Mask Up Shorewood and others. I understand the governor's doesn't have as much teeth. It doesn't involve outdoor areas, et cetera. So I agree with what Trustee Stokerbrand had mentioned. It doesn't have to be May 17th exactly, but sure, why don't we do it and we can revisit it. And we can always extend it at that time. So most likely we will need to extend it, but it's good for us to have this conversation because we are in a public health emergency, actually a crisis. So for us to bring up the pandemic more frequently than not does no one a disservice. So anyway, I guess I'd like to make a motion that we extend, let's see, what's the wording? I'm going to move that we extend our current policy until, what was it?
May 17th.
May 17th.
2021.
Yes.
I think the language is she moves to approve ordinance 3021 to May 17, 2021.
Second.
Could I just, technically, I think the motion has to be to enact the ordinance, because technically the other one actually expired under the old sunset clause. And really what you're talking about tonight is building a sunset clause, which is basically just an internal mechanism where it automatically will cease to exist after that point. But you can always just amend section number 3, which is the sunset clause, and extend it if you want later. So it doesn't, or if we wake up next week and there's a magic cure and everybody's healed and you can always just repeal an ordinance. So putting it out to review however long you feel is appropriate is really not that big of a deal one way or another. But I think for tonight's purposes, it has to be to move to enact or pass the ordinance with whatever sunset clause, whatever date you want to have in there.
Okay, so moved, exactly what you said, May 17th.
Second.
Okay, is there further discussion? Anyone from the public on the call interested in making a comment? Seeing none. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yep. Trustee Carpenter.
Aye.
Trustee Backhorst.
Yes.
Trustee Menta.
No.
Trustee Stokerbrand.
Aye.
Trustee Warren.
Aye.
Trustee Ursink.
Aye.
And Allison is just joining back, so 1 second. Oh, maybe she's gone. All right, motion passes 6-0. 6-1,
I-
5-1, I'm sorry.
Trustee Stoker-Brandt,
Yeah.
I just like the minutes to reflect that I would have rather had the end date go to the end date for the state, and that's why I voted no.
Duly noted. Clerk Bruckman, please.
Yep, I have it noted, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to new business item 9G. I'm sorry, 9F is in Frank. Consider resolution 2021-04.
I'd like to make a motion.
Trustee Carpenter,
I move to adopt resolution 2021-04 proclaiming
Brandon. Sorry.
October 2nd, 2021 as International Migratory Bird Day in the village of Shorewood.
I'll second that.
second by trustee Warren. Discussion? Among any trustees that would like to make a comment, and I'll cede the chair to President Rozek.
Okay. Was there a motion made?
Yes, we did pass the extending the mask mandate in Shorewood, and we're on to 9F, the World Migratory Bird Day.
Okay. Do we have any comments or questions?
Okay. We lost her again.
Trustee Stoker-Brandt, you're back up.
Okay. Any no comments about nothing for the birds? Trustee Ursink.
Just a little bit of background on this, on where it came from, the relevance. Does anybody have any more background on this?
It's a required resolution that we pass for purposes of the Conservation Committee submitting on this designation on an annual basis. So it's something that you can anticipate seeing at every meeting this time of year.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, and there's no, I don't see anybody's hand up, so Clerk Bruckman, would you please call the roll?
Trustee Menta.
Aye.
Trustee Stoker-Brandt.
Aye.
Trustee Warren.
Aye.
Trustee Backhorst.
Yes.
Trustee Carpenter.
Aye.
Trustee Ursink.
Aye.
And President Rozek is back. So this is the resolution for Migratory Bird Day.
Thank you. Aye.
All right, motion passes 7-0.
Trustee Stoker-Brandt, can you finish the meeting? I will attend, but I now am on my phone and I know I cannot see all the participants.
Okay, new business 9G. Review open records policy, neighboring community policies, and provide direction on group to review the policy moving forward. Page 172 in the packet. And is Rebecca, did you want to start?
I think I'll take it. Rebecca, you're on mute, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Sarah, go ahead.
All right. So before you is a decision to make where the open records discussion should lie. And at the December board meeting, the board had consensus that the JP&L committee should review the open records ordinance. And then at the January 4th JP&L meeting, they requested that the open records policy be reviewed on the next village board agenda. So tonight we've provided you with our current ordinance and our police policy, and then some of the surrounding North Shore communities policies and forms that they utilize with their police department, and then just with their clerk's offices. Our current fee schedule, and then if you would like the village board to discuss this as a whole, or this should go back to the JP&L committee for February 1st.
So
Okay,
there was one other.
Manager Ewald, please.
There's just one other thing at the end. Claire Silverman has agreed to come and provide an informational session to the board on open records. As you'll see from the compliance guide, that the Attorney General has put out Josh Call, which was also a hyperlinked attachment within the scope of your packet. It's a document that is about 100 pages. And so there's a lot of detail involved. And the league has typically provided educational sessions on this. So I would encourage the board to take her up on that offer, because not many of us dabble in this every day. So getting some good education and information prior to policy making may be something of interest to the board.
Okay, thank you. We'll open it up for some discussion. Any trustees that would like to speak? No. Trustee Amenta?
Oh, well, Trustee Carpenter probably has a better recollection, but we talked about this at our last meeting at JP&L, and I think my feeling is before we at JP&L get into a long, work process on open records, that it was worthwhile to have at least one conversation at the full board, to hear what the other 4 members of the board think is important and think we should change. And, so to at least have one discussion so we know other people's opinions rather than just the 3 of us trying to come up with something. So I think that was at least my rationale for wanting to have a discussion at the full board. But I mean, before we do that, I think we need to know, like, what are the types of open records requests that we're getting? How many are we getting? How much time is it taking? And then, we've had issues about the type of format that we'll provide to people. And then there's what the law is, but we don't necessarily, the law is kind of the floor. We don't necessarily have to be at the floor. We can have a different standard of openness and availability of public records to the public. So, I think it's important to understand. I mean, I find the Attorney General's guide to be very clear. So if the rest of the board wants to have a educational thing on it, I guess that's okay. I mean, I feel like I'm not sure that's essential, but I think that there's a couple of issues, not only like how open we're going to be, what format we're going to provide records to when people ask to be able to scan or to get things digitally versus getting a paper copy of something. Also, but a lot of this, I think, also dovetails with what we've been talking about in terms of the police study and in terms of how we keep data, and are we keeping it in a kind of a format that is that we can provide source data if it's asked for, instead of providing like someone on staff doing a summary of it and giving a summary of it, rather than like just, okay, here's the number of calls, here's the, so there's a lot of policy issues about it. And that was my feeling, that I wanted to have everyone have a chance to say something about it before JP&L spends a lot of time on it. But Jessica may have a different, or Arthur may have a different recollection.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Carpenter, were you?
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar intention and or recollection, excuse me, to get some board input before we really started to kind of get into things, and to make sure that we had, just some direction from the rest of the board before we moved forward and brought something back that was not encompassing of what the rest of the board was looking for. So I don't know if Trustee Ursink had any other thoughts.
Thank you. Trustee Ursink?
No, I think that's right in line with what we discussed at JP&L. So I think that's, I think my only comment was, we're approaching 10:30 at night, and this is a really big conversation. And, I would suggest also deferring this potentially till after, the February meeting that we have with, in regards to the citizen complaint. I think that'll be an important conversation to have that might help dictate this conversation. But I'm happy. I'm excited to hear what the rest of the board has to say about this.
So to clarify, Trustee Ursink, you would rather defer this until after the complaint?
Yeah, I would defer to after the complaint and try to get it higher up on the agenda, because I think we could spend a lot of time talking about this, and we're doing a disservice talking about it at 10:30 at night. So
Okay, Trustee Warren and then Trustee Bockhorst.
Yeah, when I first reviewed the packet, I thought, yeah, JP&L should just should handle it. But then listening to Trustee Amenta, Trustee Carpenter, Trustee Ursink, I think it probably does make a good deal of sense to discuss to Nikau and see where the board comes down on it before JP&L spends a ton of time on it, and get the board, get the consensus of the board during a cow. So that makes sense to me. I mean, whatever kind of education we can get, I think would be helpful as well. I mean, open records is complicated. It's something that kind of requires understanding of the intricacies of how it works. So I'd support that too. And those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Trustee Bockhorst.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with a lot of the statements that were made. Number one, I'll just start with, I do think that we need to revise the policy on open records for a variety of reasons. I do think we need to make them more accessible, and I won't go and launch into all this. So I really look forward to this discussion. I do have a couple of questions, but before I get to those, I will say that if Claire from the League of Wisconsin Municipalities is offering us a course, and we're trying to make a policy around public records, and we don't think we need that course, then, and yet I don't know which of you are public records experts, but we're making this decision and writing a policy as a board, then I think we would be, I think it'd be pretty, it'll be irresponsible for us to not at least take that guidance. I can also let you know that at the state level, this has been one of the issues that's been, that the League Lobbying Committee has been involved in, open records, because municipalities do it differently throughout the state. Of course, they must abide by state statutes, but there is a lot of information. She's succinct. She doesn't BS. I think many of you will enjoy her presentation and the information that you will receive, as will I. I'm taking a class through, or a course through Milwaukee as well on open records. But there's a reason that we're talking about this. That I'm not, so anyway, I would say that we definitely take that information. I also really appreciate that, I forget who it was, Trustee Carpenter maybe, that said that you would like some board input before we get into things, and then maybe either take it to JP&L or take it to the cow. To me, it doesn't matter. I would prefer to put it at JP&L. You guys brought it here. I don't need to be involved in all the intricate discussions regarding this. I think it would be almost a waste of time for everyone if we did that. I think you guys had an exact reason that you brought it forward. You also had a reason why 2 of the 3 of you voted to bring the citizen complaint forward too. So I don't know what those are. I haven't watched the whole video, but that would, I think JP&L makes a lot of sense as far as this is concerned. I do think though that we have let this, the resident that brought the complaint and is really concerned with open records, we've kind of, I won't say let him along, but he is here. It's 10:30 at night. And if we are going to completely punt on this discussion, without hearing any of the opinions of board members right now, I'm not really sure why we wouldn't just, put an end point to other discussions. So I would say that we give at least everyone here an opportunity to at least speak their mind, including the public, before we defer this. Are we deferring it or tabling it? That would be one of my questions, but also, yeah, there is a reason that we are discussing this. So, and I get it, and I appreciate that JP&L would like the input from the rest of us. And this is the exact same reason why I said that we can't adopt a CDA policy after just one look around, something that we didn't even create. So that's That's all I have to say about that for now.
Okay, so President Rozek, and then I have a comment. And is there anyone want to speak on this from the public? Anyway, President Rozek, if you would, you have the floor. I can't.
You're muted.
Thank you so much for recognizing me. I also want to thank Rebecca for putting it on the agenda to get further direction and for providing our policy along with examples of others. And I think this is one of the most desired topics to speak about for the last, since I've been a board member, so at least 6 years. And I'm glad it's finally made its way to the board for discussion. I too agree with Trustee Amenta that the Attorney General's opinion and policy or guidance is pretty clear if you read it, but I also think that any education is welcomed. So if the league would like to come and for free provide some legal opinion on open records, that'd be fabulous. And I think they can do that whether it's at committee or full board or at the COW. In any setting, any trustee is welcome to attend. I do think that moving forward, we should, like we do on other issues, maybe email our village manager some of the topics in open records that we believe need to be addressed or need to be changed or that we have concern or want to learn more about. It is a broad topic. I heard from Trustee Amenta tonight at the beginning of this agenda item. She mentioned a couple that I agree with 100%. How, learning the law is one thing, which we will do if we need a refresher. But then deciding our policy is something also a little different. And so there are topics within open records, like subjects that I think if you have concern about, one would be duplication of records, format of records, the data keeping for producing records. Those three were mentioned already by Trustee Amenta. I think those three could be forwarded to the village manager. If there are other things within the public open records policy that exists or that is from any literature out there that the board would like to discuss or have JP&L discuss at one of its meetings or the COW, I think knowing those topics and subjects will help us guide in our discussion rather than being all over the place with open records. And I don't think this is directed at any, this is a policy and it's been requested to be on the agenda for over 6 years. And so it is a big topic. I don't expect that it'll take one meeting. And as a matter of fact, I expect that it'll take multiple meetings in order to create a policy that we are all comfortable with. So with that, if you have specific topics or subjects, and Rebecca, you have no objections, I think it would be good to get a list for our next discussion, wherever that may be, of subjects within open records that we'd like to address or like to discuss. That's all for now. Thank you.
Manager Ewald, and then I'll go.
Claire is available, Claire Silverman is available to come and give a presentation to the board on February 1st. I just want to make sure that it's scheduled to the desire of the board. So we could either schedule it in standing committee if we just want to have that available to standing committee members and then to watch on video later for the other trustees, or I could schedule a committee of the whole and designate a portion of it for her presentation and then the other for Q&A from the board.
And again, the whole board, any board member can watch it in committee. I don't care where it goes. I'm just saying any board member can watch it live and participate in a committee meeting.
Oh, sure. The only reason I was asking is because I didn't want to schedule other standing committees at the same time because of the split group. So I'm just sensitized to that. And I just want to make sure that if people do want to attend and they want an ability to ask questions, that they have an opportunity to do so. I just wanted to make sure that we were on the same page.
Thank you. I would really embrace that opportunity, and I think it should be, because I'm not on JP&L, it could be a JP&L committee meeting, but I think a committee of the whole would be better because I would like to attend and I would to not have a conflict with another committee. I think that transparency and accountability are extremely important to me as a trustee. And so I would encourage us to embrace the most robust open records policy that we can come up with. But my concerns are cost and functionality, how much staff time, I mean, I think we all know, even in our personal lives, we can literally be swimming in data. But the question is, how do you make it usable? And so that's the piece that I want to know is if the JP&L can find a way to make policies so we know what the burden will be on staff and we're ready for that, because I think it's important that we make stuff available. And it looks like from the information from the other communities, we could be a leader in this area. Nobody else really has open records policy other than for the police. So that's what I have. Trustee Bachhorst, I guess we'll go around one more time.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I'm a little confused because this very board, earlier today, we had a CDA policy for TIF, which is a big deal for redevelopment in our village. And I was told when I was interrupted and cut off that we shouldn't email things to Rebecca, and I disagree with that statement. So that because of transparency, and we're in a publicly held board meeting. Here is a topic that, as a couple trustees have mentioned, has been ongoing for 6 years. I understand it's late. I'm tired. I have to get up. It's in 6 hours. But we also, and we're up here this late because this board does take a lot of time on things. We're very thorough, and that's great. So I would not want to, just again, so I don't understand the, I'm not going to say hypocrisy, but the dichotomy here almost of this being okay to email and not have a public discussion before we get into versus something else before. Forgive me, but I do agree we have a lot of reading material, and as Trustee Amenta said before, we all get our packets ahead of time. We all have the opportunity to read and ask questions ahead of time. So we could do that now, but I do think that we need to provide the public with an easier, a more accessible way to get records and data. And that will cost money. Trustee Stokebrand is absolutely right that there will be a price tag and staff time and other things associated with this. But we do have the police organizational study. We do have residents that are asking for police data, and we do not have an easy way to provide this information. We are making a variety of policies in this village, and we don't have an easy way to not only secure the data, analyze it, and provide it to the public who wants to make decisions, or to the village board that's looking to make decisions, or even the staff. And I know we're talking about open records here. We're not talking about just any kind of data on a database. But I wouldn't be surprised if there are more inquiries from not only the police department, but publicly elected officials, et cetera. And having an easy way to synthesize, process that data, and provide it to the village is an important thing. Are we going to be able to do all that and discuss this whole thing tonight? No. But what I would hope that we would have is not just kicking this can and saying, okay, we'll discuss open records at some time in the future. That I say we have that date where Claire can come in and present to either the COW or JP&L. I'm fine either way. If it is just JP&L though, I would say that we do need to have, I would think it should be the COW, because if we're going to be discussing this, which we have said for 6 years that we're going to do. So anyway, I'll be quiet. I'm tired.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Amenta?
Yeah, I just think the assumption that changing our open records policy or being more open than we are currently is going to be more costly. I would hesitate to make that assumption, because when you look at the amount of time that staff currently spend and that we spend on attorney time dealing with open records, we're spending quite a lot of money now. And I think so I think we should be looking always at expenses, but I think if there are ways for us to rationalize and simplify, we would actually be saving money.
Okay, thank you. So can I see a show of hands? Who wants this to go to a cow with Claire, starting with a Claire Silverman program?
Point of clarification, point of order. Were we going around the table one more time?
I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand, President Rosick.
Thank you. I forgot to mention one thing that I have been wanting to say about, can you hear me? Yes. So one of the most important things I think for public open records, when we discuss it, one of the subjects that I forgot to mention was the assignment of responsibility. So I agree with Trustee Amenta, and it's been a big issue. When do we get attorney involvement, and when is it a clerk's responsibility? I think that's a big decision for us and for other municipalities where and who makes that decision. So I think when we do a policy, the subject of assignment of, collection of data, who works with the IT person, if emails are requested, who is the collector of that data and who is the lead, is going to be a really important subject to address when we address our policy. I think that will help save us a ton of money. And I just believe it's important. I didn't want to forget that. So thank you for recognizing me.
Okay, thank you, President Rosick. So again, I'm just going to look for a show of hands who would be interested in a cow with Claire Silverman, as Rebecca, Manager Ewald, has outlined. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And is that enough direction for you right now, Manager Ewald? And then I also want to check with Chair of the JP&L. Do you have what you need from us right now? Trustee Carpenter?
I mean, I think going through that conversation will be helpful as a cow. And I think from there, we will have some additional information. I don't know that tonight proved to be as fruitful, I think, as our committee had hoped, but I think we're taking some steps which will be helpful.
Okay, thank you. So we'll do the cow with Claire Silverman on February 1st, Rebecca, and then plan next steps after that.
Can I just suggest that we also utilize that time for board discussion as well? The presentation, just keep it short, and so that we have time in that cow for board discussion. I mean, cow discussion, like committee members.
Okay, noted. Trustee Bachhorst and then Trustee Carpenter.
Okay, I'm just looking at the agenda to see how this is agenda sized. Review open records policy, okay, and provide direction on group. So I guess we don't have to make any formal motions. You feel that this is adequate, Rebecca, regarding direction?
Yes.
Okay, great. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Number 10, reports of village.
Sorry, I just had one.
I'm sorry. Trustee Carpenter, I'm sorry.
It's okay. About the meeting or with Claire, I don't know her last name.
Silverman.
Thank you. Can we just make sure that meeting starts at 6? Obviously this will be a long conversation, and I just want to make sure we have as much time as possible before the full board meeting starts.
Okay.
I'm not available at 6 o'clock, but I could probably be available at 6:30, fortunately.
Okay, and Trustee Warren? Did I see your hand?
Yeah, I was agreeing
Okay,
that we
that was a thumbs up.
Yeah, that was a thumbs up.
Okay, anyone else? I see Mr. Davidian's hand.
Yes. Jeff, if you'd like to unmute yourself and state your name and address, please.
Jeff Davidian, 4101 North Prospect. I've been raising this issue with you for more than a year, and I see here absolutely no leadership, not from the staff or from the village board. You are under a court agreement to provide records at a reasonable price and by state law to produce them within a reasonable period of time. You don't seem to care about that. You think the process of coming to understand what you need to do is the same as abiding by the law. You're not. And as I told a couple of trustees, I don't think you're ever going to do it. And I'm going to go to court this week and ask the court to enforce the agreement. There's nothing else to do. This is really pathetic. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, number 10. Did any other trustee have a response? No. Okay. Oh, trustee Bockhorst.
I'd like to say that I'll just apologize for myself, Mr. Davidian, and you do what you need to do, but I hear you, and I think that we've all heard you many times. And but I do think that we are taking this forward. And just like a lot of things, it can take time for us. But yeah, I agree, we do need to do something. And I'm really sorry that you were here until 11 o'clock at night just to hear us say we're kicking the can.
Trustee Amenta.
Can I say too, in the forward to this item, it says that I brought this up as a priority in 2018, but I'm pretty sure it was a priority of mine in 2019 and in 2020. I've been asking for us to address this issue now for at least 3 years. And, you know, it's frustrating to me that it's taken as long for us to get here, but at least we are here.
Trustee Bockhorst.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, looking at the timeline here, and I know this is not comprehensive, that's not the right word, all encompassing, but Trustee and I have asked for a lot of discussion on this in the past, and I'm frustrated as well, Trustee Amenta, and I'd like to work with you to make sure this happens. So if we can put aside any differences that we have and make sure that we can get this going, maybe as your parting wish to the board, then I'm all for it. And I hope the rest of you too will understand. She has been asking for this for a while. A lot of us have, and yet it's 2021 now. And but part of that is that we have to stop loading other things on our plates if we're going to get through the business that we've prioritized in the past. I know that this is one of the things that was a priority and it was going to be in JPL, and now it came to full board. I think we could probably wasted everyone's time by circumventing the whole JPL process. Taking items to committee really gives a smaller group the amount of time to work through things. We've seen what happens when we come to full board. A lot of it depends on who's chairing and who gets to speak and when. So I'm with you, Trustee Amenta. Let's get this done. Let's make an effort to get this done before you leave your term in near the end of April.
President Rozek. You're muted. I can't.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a major concern at this moment. I have not been notified during our agenda meeting. I was notified. I was asked, where should this policy go? If the concern from a resident is, I believe that's separate from the complaint that we are taking. It deals with the same thing, but we don't need to wait on a policy to give direction on providing data. And I have not heard anyone say to me to agendacize giving that direction. So if there is a request from a resident for data and staff needs direction from the village board in order to provide it or not, I am not aware of that. And so, Mr. Davidian, to respond to your statement, thank you for saying it. If there is a question out there that has been posed to staff and staff feels or staff cannot react without asking the village board, I have not heard it. And therefore, going to court is probably, or letting the complaint go through, it's something to consider by all of us, because I was I have not heard that there needs to be direction from the village board on anything. So right at this moment, anything that has been asked is being handled by staff. Thank you.
President Rosick.
Mr. Davidian, is your hand up from the last time, or do you want to make a final comment as we close out here?
I would like to make another comment. Thank you. One of the problems here, the main problem, is that the village attorney is misconstruing case law to make it appear that the village is entitled or justified in prohibiting a citizen from making copies themselves on their own copier rather than face hundreds of dollars in charges. That is just applying an opinion that does not apply to copies of records. I tried to get copies of records. The village attorney has offered case law that is irrelevant and not on point, and the village is following that. If you let the village attorney set policy based on fallacious understanding of a law, there is no other option. And Trustee Warren is an attorney. He must understand that particular use of that particular case to tell me that I cannot get records unless I pay hundreds of dollars. It's just wrong. And Trustee Warren, if you don't agree with me, maybe we can talk separately. But I don't want to sue my neighbors. But you leave me no opportunity. Not only that, the records that I did see showed that the village is, or that the police department is not keeping track of the money correctly for the records. So, Trustee Warren, you want to hear my side of it? Let's talk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. President
So,
Rose.
I just have a clarifying question. My clarifying question is, there has been a court case. I've asked staff to provide that to us before we hear the complaint. I've heard a resident over and over now cite that court case, and I don't have a copy of it. I don't know if everybody else on the board does, but I think it's quite important, and I'm requesting before the next time we hear or discuss as a board this complaint, that we understand what the court has ordered us to do, and we then know what we're being asked to do. And so I don't see that court case in front of me tonight, and I'm requesting again in public that we be provided with it, all 7 of us, before we talk about or discuss this complaint whenever it's next scheduled. Thank you.
I could be wrong, but I believe that in all of his emails, hasn't he included the court case?
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I've seen it.
Yep.
I don't believe that I've received that. Has that been in trustee communication?
Maybe it's a misrecollection on my part. I just thought that some of his emails. I'm
only asking because we've requested a copy of it from the circuit court and the full documentation of it. We have what's available on CCAP, but I have not seen that. So if someone has that and would care to forward it, I would appreciate it.
Okay, I'll go back to my email to see if
I copy. The village attorney has all the records. His firm was a party to it.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking forward to wrapping this up. So it's 11, Trustee Bockhorst and Trustee Warren, and then Manager Ewald.
Thank you. Are we talking about 2 different things here? Are we talking about the item on the agenda, or are we talking about the complaint against the attorney? President Rosick, you've mentioned in your last 2 times at the mic, I haven't really followed where you were going with these things. I'm asking this because is there something I'm missing here? So I think the item tonight is open records policy, and but regarding the complaint Or wait, is that what we're talking about? The complaint about the records policy? Or are you talking about the complaint about the attorney?
I think both issues have come up. Which one would you like to address right now?
Well, the other one we all know is agenda sized for the next meeting, and this is the one that's on the agenda tonight, right?
No, we're just discussing the open records policy, but then I thought his hand was up, so I decided to let him speak.
Oh, well, he's speaking about the open records policy. We're not talking about his complaint against Nathan. He might have been, but this board is talking about the open records policy. That's
my understanding.
Okay.
Trustee
What are our
Warren.
next steps on this?
Just to chime in, I'll keep it brief because we're coming to the end here. But in light of what you two, in light of what this is agendized for, I'll just say that this discussion tonight that we're having as a board underscores the need to have a long, protracted discussion on this. And I think that we've all at one point or another talked about transparency in government and making sure that people have access to what they need and what they request. So I think it's a value that all of us share. And what we're talking about tonight really underscores the need for us as a board to come together and solve something that has been pushed throughout the years. And certainly, I'm not on JPNL. I'm not a member of that, but I look forward to getting a lot closer to these issues. I mean, I have a kind of high level understanding, but I certainly need to dig a little deeper, and I'll use the next week to do so.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Otherwise, I think we should move on to number 10, report of village officials. Sorry, excuse me, Manager Ewald.
I just want to be clear because President Rozek, I wasn't following you into the references that you were making towards staff and whether they were or were not following some type of procedure. And I'm wondering if you can clarify that for me, please.
I believe it's very important, as I've stated in our agenda meetings, that before we hear the complaint at the next time, every board member has a clear understanding of what has been required by the court case. Our attorney should have a copy. His firm was involved, as Mr. Davidian has said. In order to talk about that complaint, I don't know how you separate that from an understanding. I know that you have mentioned you can't send it to the board because you don't have a copy, but I know our attorney's firm must have a copy because it's a court case. That was settled out of court, but there's some documentation. So I'd like to read that before we move forward. I wanted to, because of what the resident said tonight, I just am making the request again that it be forwarded to the full board.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I look forward to an opportunity to read it as well. That's why I'd appreciate if someone did have it, if they could kindly forward it to me.
Our attorney should be able to get it. Thank you.
But is there any other concern relative to policy that you were referencing in your statement? Because I do want to make sure that I clarify that if there is.
Nope.
If that was it, then that was it.
That was it. If there's been any other request by a citizen to talk about something different than the policy, and you need direction from the village board, please pass that along.
Okay, thank you. Are we ready to move on then? Number 10, report of village officials. The President Rozek.
Thank you. I have no report at this time.
Thank you. Trustees, I was just going to say one thing. I don't have a report, but I was going to ask about how the parking was going, but I'll ask that at another meeting. Any other trustees? Trustee Ursink?
The Lake Bluff ice rink is open and it's been getting a lot of usage. It's been a really nice escape, I think, for people in the community. We've seen a lot of kids out there, and everybody's wearing masks. And then just I got to compliment the ice captains. There's a lot of hard work that goes into that ice rink. A lot of late nights of pouring water and shoveling. So there's some really unsung heroes right there, and the rink is just such a blessing for our kids and our community. So really appreciate that.
Thank you. And Manager Ewald?
No report.
I'm sorry, Trustee Bachhorst, did you want me to go back to you have a trustee report? Sorry.
Yes. Also, school is starting up again in Shorewood, as many of you are aware, the hybrid model. And to Trustee Ursink's point about the ice rink, that's gorgeous. What a great community amenity. And we're very fortunate that the school district's able to provide us with that space, the resources, and we have so many dedicated community volunteers. I walk by Red Arrow Park every day, twice, and see all these skaters there. So I look forward to seeing those at Lake Bluff as well. Yeah, that's all I can remember right now.
Okay, and then items for future consideration. Anything to add to the discussion we've already had today, Trustee Bockhorst, about open records law?
Well, just that I'm taking the course through the city, and I'll find out if I'm able to make a copy. I don't have to pay for it, but I believe others do. So it's probably, sadly, I'm not able to share that. Which brings up a good point about, all of this, that it shouldn't be cost prohibitive for anyone in this community to not only know about records, but also to be able to access them. And we talk a lot about equity and inclusion, and I hope this course covers that, because having the ability to get records is a pretty much fundamental transparent right. And I understand there are associated costs with that. So I look forward to finding out from this course if there are cheaper, more efficient, as Trustee Ament had said. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be expensive for us. So I will report back next time. I think that actually it'll be the second meeting in February, unfortunately, because I think it's that first week in February.
Okay, Trustee Ursink and then Trustee Amenta.
Something I'd like to add for future conversation is vaccine rollout here in the North Shore, and specifically in Wisconsin. I've seen today that Governor Evers is saying that it's now vaccines are open for 65 plus, but talking to the Senior Resource Center, they've been flooded with calls, and they're really pretty backed up. They're asking people to call the North Shore Health Department. So I think there's a lot of confusion out there, and I would love to know more of the status on that so we can properly communicate with the public about what they can expect for vaccine rollout here in Shorewood and the North Shore.
Are you making a motion? I apologize, but for future agenda items, we make a motion, get a second, we discuss.
I mean, so what's the motion here? I move to invite Ann Christensen from the North Shore Health Department to update us on COVID vaccines in the North Shore.
Second. A seconded motion by Trustee Ursink, seconded by Trustee Warren.
On a future agenda.
For a future agenda item, do I need to do a roll call, Sarah Bruckman?
Yes.
Would you please call the roll?
Can I make him?
I'm sorry.
I was just wondering if I could maybe amend the motion to, I think that would be if we could maybe have every other meeting update from her going forward, I think would be really helpful. There's just so much to cover right now. So, if we could amend the motion to.
I'll allow that for sure.
I'll second it.
Yeah.
Oh, motion made by Trustee Carpenter and seconded by Trustee Bockhorst.
Thank you.
All in favor of the, do we need a roll call vote for the amendment?
I was going to amend it too, but go ahead. I'll just add a new motion.
Can I just say, given the amount of stuff we have on our meetings and the lengths of our meetings, if there's other ways of communicating besides having Ann come to our meetings and talk. I mean, we can ask her to give us a report. We can email her questions, ask her to put it on her website. I mean, I just don't know if it's an efficient use of our time. I'm going to vote no.
Okay, any other trustees talk about the amendment to the motion? Trustee Bockhorst.
So maybe I should make a separate motion for this, but I was thinking along the same lines that we should actually have a task force or something to deal with this. We are still in the throes of a pandemic, and we spoke of it tonight because of the mask ordinance expiration. And so I don't know, I guess maybe I'll have to email this to Rebecca, but I would hate to put this off for much longer, but I think that maybe a subgroup, or we should come up with a committee structure or something. We should be really proactive right now with this pandemic, and especially since Wisconsin is behind the times as far as the vaccines. We know we have short supply, only 65 and plus. I want to make sure the seniors, not just in Shorewood, but and beyond, are getting what they need. We have kids going back to school. We have a lot. So I I'll make a separate motion after this, but anyway, I support the motion as stated.
So we have an amendment to the motion. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so we need to take a roll call vote on the amendment, which I believe is, if you want to read it, is to add the caveat to have,
An update from Ann Christensen at every other board meeting.
please call the roll, Clerk Brookman.
Trustee Warren,
Aye.
Trustee Bachhorst,
Yes.
Trustee Menta,
No.
Trustee Stokebrand,
No.
Trustee Ursing,
Yes.
Trustee Carpenter,
Yes.
President Rosick.
No.
Motion passes 4-3.
And now to vote on the original motion, please.
Yep, it would be to invite Ann Christensen to every other meeting to update on the COVID vaccine rollout. Trustee Bachhorst,
Yes.
Trustee Carpenter,
Yes.
Trustee Warren,
Aye.
Trustee Ursing,
Yes.
Trustee Stokebrand,
No.
Trustee Menta,
No.
President Rosick.
No.
Motion passes 4-3.
Trustee Bachhorst.
I was going to reconsider the vote because we had said in the amendment that what we said two different words. One was that we were going to invite her and one was that we were going to require her. I can't remember the exact verbiage, but we can't tell her to be at every other meeting. And I hope everyone understands that. So if the intention was to invite her to come as frequently as she is able, then I'm okay with keeping my vote in the affirmative. But if you guys are saying that she must be there, then we can't do that. We can't require that.
I have invite.
Okay, perfect. Then there
So if
it
I
is.
said require, I apologize. I have invite.
And then I'd like to move to place on an item for future consideration a discussion on an emergency village plan here for the pandemic around COVID-19. Like I said before, we have kids going back to school. We have a variety of concurrent items. We have numbers still ridiculously high and a lot of people dying across the nation. And we also have a highly politicized nation where a lot of people don't wear masks because they're affiliated with one party and others do, which is unfortunate. So, oh, forget it. I'm not going to do it.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.